Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal. See playlist for other chapters and novels. Join now our Telegram channel now and enjoy exclusive early access. t.me/blood_immortal_official. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 161. They knew where Gigantes was, but there was a problem. Bubbling lava. How were they going to get into this sea of lava that was hard to even get close to? Heracles would be able to get in without any problems, but just how long would he be able to last in there? Yuan wasn't the only one who knew this fact. Get out of the way. Heracles walked towards the lava with large strides. Yuan had been fighting with him for quite some time now. Just by looking at the situation, he could tell what he was trying to do. A fist that shot up. Boom. Heracles slammed his fist down on the bubbling lava. Then, splot, the lava shot up because of the fist that had fallen down. Thanks to the force that was transferred deep down below, the river of lava that had been there split, and the ground that had been locked up below revealed itself. Splash, splash, screech, the lava shot up and fell back down. Swish, Heracles covered Yuan's head with the lion's pelt he had been wearing. You have received protection of the Lion King. All attribute resistance increases, absorbs a certain amount of damage. Clank, clang, the pelt that protected his body from the lava that fell above his head. It was quite good defensive gear. Of course, it had its own defensive abilities, but it also had the special skill, protection of the lion. Of course, even without this, I could have protected him with triangle. Heracles, who couldn't have known that, had naturally handed the lion's pelt to Yuan to protect him. Follow me, the path is open now. Ah, crack, crack. A hole that had been pierced by the great shock. He wondered if he could really call that a path. Yeah, a path. In any case, his strength was truly ignorant. Punching a hole into a sea of lava with just one punch. Heracles, the giant slayer. He had the power to destroy an entire floor by himself. But didn't you say that it was further down? That's right. How far down do we have to go? Like before, Yuan pointed down to the bottom where the lava had disappeared with his hand. Just do that 3 more times. Got it. Boom. Heracles swung his fist like before. Just as I thought. Where? Kwang, Kwang. Maybe it's a trap. With a deep thud, a large hole was created on the ground. A dark and deep underground. There was nothing like that below. What the heck is this place? Heracles looked up with a dumbfounded expression. He had thought that if he broke the ground and went down, there would be a damp and dark underground space. But what the heck? The underground that the two of them had come down to was too bright and familiar to be an underground. When Heracles looked up, a light blue ceiling entered his eyes. Shining light, a blue sky, it looked just like the sky. Is this place really underground? It was a deep underground that was several kilometers down. If it weren't for the traces of his destruction, he might have thought that this place was exactly the same as the ordinary world. Thud, having arrived at their destination, Wu Wen began to walk toward the tall mountain in the distance. He didn't seem very surprised. Heracles asked Wu Wen, who didn't seem fazed, how did you know about a place like this? I had an informant. An informant, even if I tell you, you won't know who it is. Even if you wanted to meet them, you wouldn't be able to. Wu Wen continued with a slightly bitter voice, same goes for me. How did he know? He had heard about this place from Heracles himself. Of course, he couldn't tell him that right now. Even if he did, it wasn't like Heracles had the same skill as Sun Ogong's one fire eye vision, so he wouldn't believe him anyway. He'd probably just think he was crazy. So stop blabbering and just follow me for now. The expression and tone of Wu Wen's voice toward Heracles had changed. If you want to know the truth. Thud, Wu Wen walked toward the tall mountain. Watching Wu Wen's back, Heracles muttered, the truth. What kind of truth was he talking about? Was he saying that he had been deceived about something? His suspicion toward Wu Wen grew. He had known from the beginning that Wu Wen had approached him knowing who he was, but he hadn't cared. He was the first easygoing and friendly person he had met in a long time. He had thought that it wouldn't be bad to have a friend like that, regardless of his true identity. But ever since they had arrived at this place, he had begun to think that Wu Wan might be the ringleader of the giants. And if that was the case, it could be a trap. Yu Wan no longer tried to hide anything. Perhaps, if he followed, something would happen. Whether it was a secret or a trap. If it is a trap. Thud, Heracles clenched both fists and followed Yuan. I will destroy everything. The direction Yuan headed was towards a mountain. A fairly large mountain, several kilometers high. However, Yuan did not climb the mountain in the end. Why did you stop? Heracles no longer walked beside Yuan. Yuan looked back at Heracles, who had been following him, and asked. Why are you walking so far away? Suspicious. As expected, you can't lie. What do you know about me to say, as expected? That's what I'm saying. One-sided communication is this difficult. Knowing only one side of the story was an even more uncomfortable relationship than not knowing each other at all. Yuan had felt that fact several times recently. Anyways, why did you ask me why I stopped? Yuan pointed forward with his chin and said. You'll know if you just stretch out your fist that way. That way. There was nothing where Yuan was pointing. A tall mountain covered in trees. There were no paths for people to walk, and there was no sign of life. But he was telling him to stretch out his fist. Should I just do as he says for now? The moment Heracles was about to stretch out his fist. Rumble, the ground and the mountain shook. Violently. This vibration, Heracles' voice trembled, this energy. His eyes turned bloodshot, and his head turned white as the lid opened. He had finally found it. The leader of the giants. The leader of the giants who had been at war with Olympus for a long time. Gigantes. Crack, screech, flesh-colored skin appeared through the cracks in the ground. How long had he been asleep? The mountain, which was several kilometers long, moved as a whole. Yuan looked at Heracles' face, which was becoming crazed, and asked. Are you that happy? Heracles did not answer. It was not worth answering. Revenge, do you want it that badly? What? That was when, for the first time, Heracles looked at Yuan with a crazed face. Revenge, revenge. Normally, giants would die here. What is your business? Heracles strode towards Enyo. Really, what are you doing? Don't be so excited. Enyo slowly looked at the king of the giants who was slowly waking up. Let's just clear up the misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Open hollow corner bracket someone said. A voice that shook the heavens. Even though it was just a simple voice without a single bit of mana, it created the illusion that their bodies were being crushed just by hearing it. Open hollow corner bracket the giant slayer has come here. The mountain that had stretched out its limbs and raised its head while yawning. Long and thick legs. It showed off an ignorant sense of oppression with a large stature that seemed like it could reach the sky where the two people had fallen. Open hollow corner bracket your name is Heracles, right? Heracles had shown great active in the first gigantomachi. The high ranker who had killed the most giants. The giant slayer. Gigantes, king, gigants, couldn't have not known him. Yes, that's right, Heracles. Quack. Strength entered his clenched fist. Killing intent surged up, and mana began to pour out of Heracles' body for the first time. Of course, I'm also the giant slayer. Open hollow corner bracket then, your business should be obvious. A long sleep. When he woke up, his old enemy, the giants, were right before his eyes. There was no way that giants would just let this situation go. Goo. The mana that had begun to pour out of the two people's bodies connected the sky and the earth. The moment the two were about to clash. Warwick. A giant flame rose up between the two people. Their gazes met. Can you stop for a bit? In the middle of it, Enyo was standing while giving off holy fire. What? Open hollow corner bracket who is this? Gigants made a strange expression at the face that he was seeing for the first time. There was also a slight hostility mixed in with that expression and voice. It seemed like he thought that Enyo, who wasn't a giant, would be on Heracles' side. The result will be obvious if we fight here. The three gigantes were existences that were on the same level as the three gods of Olympus. That was why they had pride in their own abilities. That no one, other than the three gods, could defeat them. However, his opponent was Heracles. You shouldn't think that 1,000 years ago and now are the same. Originally, gigantes would die here, in the hands of Hercules, and very miserably. I couldn't just stand there and watch. If I did, the second gigantomachi would occur, and the war would become uncontrollable. As long as Hercules continues to search for the gigantes, it will happen someday. Yuan guided Hercules to this place now to prevent that. Relying only on strength and fighting without thinking is the same for everyone, regardless of race. What, open hollow corner bracket, are you responsible for what you're saying right now? When the two voices spoke at the same time, Yuan furrowed his brows and looked back at Gigantes. Try to speak as politely as possible. It hurts my ears. Open hollow corner bracket, what kind of insolence is this? Close hollow corner bracket. Hey, do you know why you're fighting? It was a fundamental question. Because the first person to answer that question was Gigantes. Open hollow corner bracket, that bastard is a giant killer. He killed the most of our race, and he will kill more in the future. Do I need any more reason? Gigantes had a clear reason. Hercules had killed the most of their race and was known as a giant killer, so he had a good reason to fight. However, he probably didn't know why Hercules hated the giants. Then, Hercules. Yuan's gaze turned to Hercules, who was facing Gigantes. What you want is revenge for your mother who was killed by the giants. Hercules' eyes wavered. How many times had he been surprised since meeting Yuan? How did you know this? Swish, clang, quote. Hercules caught something Yuan threw at him with his large hand. Check what it is. What is this? Hercules' face contorted when he checked the item in his hand. A thin, long, red necklace. It was an unforgettable item. This, rumble. Hercules' eyes turned upside down, and the enormous mana that he had been hiding within his body began to overturn the ground. Why do you have this? His anger turned from Gigantes to Yuan. Chapter 162. Blood Drop Necklace. A necklace made by weaving blood drops. Someone's deep wish is embedded in it. Protects the user's body. Can store and use 3 skills. There wasn't much of a description for the item. However, anyone would be tempted once they saw its effects. An item that could store 3 skills. But for Hercules, it was worth more than just an item. Why do you have it? Rumble. The ground splits open and an earthquake occurs. Euryon felt a chill for the first time in a long time at Hercules' anger. He felt as if a fist would come flying at him at any moment. He's terrifying. Still, that anger wouldn't be directed at him right away. The reason for that was probably because the necklace was in his hands. I picked it up. You picked it up. Rumble. His body was crushed down. It felt like his body was being buried deep underground. He needed to explain himself quickly. To be exact, I took it. From who? Ares. Ares. That bastard had it. The throne of war and strife. Since they had the same father, he knew the name. Of course, he had never met him. Ares hadn't done much in the Gigantomachy, and he hadn't been very active externally either. Why does he have it? Why do you think? Euryon shook his head towards the necklace. Check it out yourself. Hercules looked down at the necklace in his hand with a blank expression. Blood Drop Necklace. It was a beautiful necklace despite its name, as it looked just like blood. Hercules remembered exactly whose neck this necklace had been around. Son, Russell. He couldn't bring himself to squeeze it any harder, worried that it would break. This wasn't just a necklace, it was a relic. Everyone will try to use you. Hercules, mother. Alcmene said that to him right after giving birth to Hercules. I'm sorry, my son. For giving birth to you. For bringing you into this harsh world. A son born with the wrong fate. Zeus embraced Alcmene and made her give birth to Hercules, and she wept while cradling Hercules in her arms. Hercules, a child who would eventually become the strongest, having inherited Zeus's blood. That is why he would become unhappy in the future. The world, and Olympus in particular, would not leave Hercules alone with such power. Nevertheless, I will ask you. Hercules remembered it clearly. As a newborn baby, he remembered the voice of his mother who was holding him tightly and crying. And the appearance of himself as a newborn baby who strangely understood the meaning of those words. Please don't swing your strength around recklessly and become a good person. Clatter. The necklace was the one that Alcmene had been wearing at the time. She valued this necklace like her own heart. She did not tell Hercules from whom she had received it. Ares has this. Ares, the son of Zeus. Why did he have this necklace? It was definitely a desirable item. Items that could protect the body and store and use skills were not common. Moreover, since it was a necklace that was easy to wear, it was something that a high ranker would covet. However, that did not matter. The problem was, why, his mother's necklace, who had passed away because of the giants, was in his hands. An unsolvable question. Perhaps that guy lied to me. And suspicion. That was when Hercules looked at the playground. That necklace can store and use 3 skills. Creak. A red light began to emanate from the necklace. Hercules' pupils shook slightly. Familiar mana, but unfortunately, only the user who stored the skill can use that skill. No way. User verification complete. The user is Hercules, the son of Alcmene. The memory of the necklace will begin. Roar. An energy enveloped Hercules. He could resist if he wanted to. However, Hercules did not do so. I guess the necklace was set to automatically activate the skill when it returned to its owner. The skill that activated the moment the necklace entered Hercules' hand. It belonged to his mother, Alcmene. After a while, the bright red mana that emanated from the necklace engulfed Hercules. Before her was a newborn baby, small even for a newborn. A chubby hand covered the back of her hand. Heracles looked at himself, unable to even open his eyes properly. Is this me? It was strange to see himself so small. It was a strange feeling. He found himself smiling along with his mother, who was looking at him. Alcmene was a beautiful woman with red hair. She was the guild master of the guild and also a ranker. She had given birth to a child of Zeus, the king of Olympus. An unwanted birth, but she loved Heracles nonetheless. Son, my son. Alcmene's emotions as she held Heracles in her arms were conveyed to him. The memory of the necklace. It had the ability to convey the emotions of Alcmene, who had been wearing the necklace. Mom, the scenery changed. Heracles had really grown up in the blink of an eye. When he was young, he had survived the snakes sent by Hera. Alcmene almost fainted when she saw Heracles crushing the snakes with one hand. From a young age, Heracles grew up fighting someone. Every time, Alcmene would come forward and bow her head. Seeing that, Heracles thought that he shouldn't use his fists carelessly. How much time had passed? Heracles passed the tutorial and became a proper player. Mom, I passed the test. I'm ranked higher than Dad. The message from her son who had obtained the player kit for the first time. Alcmene smiled as she read it. It was a bitter, venomous smile. Amazing, as expected of our son. She remembered the first message she exchanged with Alcmene with the player kit. At the time, she thought that he was proud of himself for passing the test with good achievement. That wasn't it. Why? The memory of the necklace showed Alcmene's appearance. How was the test? Wasn't it difficult? Really? Did you make any friends? That's good, but take it easy for now. You'll fall if you go up too fast. Did you? But, why are you crying? Messages that they exchanged as if nothing was wrong. She had been shaking and crying so much, but she had pretended to be okay on the outside as she exchanged messages. She had wished and wished that this moment would never come. Why? So you're crazy. How could you to your son? Explanation. Zeus sends Heracles to the battlefield despite the opposition of his mother Alcmene. Alcmene learns that Heracles is seen as a weapon of war and that Zeus can create second and third Heracles to replace him. Ares, the god of war and strife, attempts to kill Alcmene, but Heracles intervenes and threatens Ares. In the end, Alcmene dies. I thought she would be proud. I thought she would be happy if I became a great ranker and glorified Olympus, if I devoted my efforts to such a righteous cause. Was I wrong? The necklace continued to illuminate the fond memories. After becoming a ranker, I went to see Alcmene. As always, Alcmene welcomed me, and later I met Zeus, the great king of Olympus, with his flowing golden hair. Heracles has become a ranker. He is still too young to go to war. As a mere ranker, she was not intimidated by Zeus. Even though he could kill her with a flick of his finger, she held her head high. She was now a mother who had become much weaker than her son. War is still a long way off. He can raise his rank by then. He'll rank up quickly. Are you really planning to raise my son as a weapon of war? He is my son before he is your son. No. In front of the king of Olympus, she shook her head firmly. No matter how much of your blood flows through him, he is my son. Yes, let's say that's true. Zeus nodded more easily than I thought. It doesn't matter whose son he is anyway. To Alcmene, what mattered most was nothing more than what Zeus would eat today. He didn't care whose son he was. Zeus had many children, and it was well known that he did not love all of them. But, a weapon of war, this conversation was not something to be dismissed. A weapon of war, not a living person, but something created. The war had been planned for a long time. For Athena to send her own blood to the battlefield was not a big deal to Zeus, at least. But there is a difference between sending a child born to the battlefield and having a child to send to the battlefield. You're crazy. Zeus, who had been looking at the reflection of the water in the pond, turned to look at Alcmene, who spoke venomously. Crazy, yes. Don't you see that child only is a weapon like a spear, sword, or bow? That's close. Of course, it's a much better weapon than those things. In that case, it's similar. Of course, it's an excellent weapon that can't be compared to such things. It was completed by the death of Heracles, mother, Alcmene. Then you're crazy. How can you to your son? I have plenty of sons and daughters. There are plenty of women who want to bear my child. If only I could break the ceiling of this tower. The ceiling of the tower. It was a story that even Heracles had heard growing up. There is a ceiling above this tower that no one has yet reached. I can also create a second and third Heracles. Ha! A hollow laugh came out. His life had been planned by someone. A son born to be used in war. Alcmene knew that fact, and had constantly implored Heracles since long ago. Don't wield your strength recklessly. Fortunately, Heracles was a son who listened quite well. That was it, the reason why his mother had to die. Chuck, chuck, chuck. Dozens of people surrounded Alcmene. Thud, someone walked out from within them. A face she had never seen before. But in the memory of the necklace, Alcmene clearly knew him. Ares, the throne of war and strife. No, at this time, he was nothing more than a fledgling who had not been ranked for very long. Of course, he was accompanied by several rankers supported by Zeus. Are you Alcmene? Yes. Then I have nothing more to say. Chong, chong. Dozens of rankers took out weapons such as spears and swords. Alcmene had a dull expression, as if she had sensed this moment long ago. Is the war about to begin soon? Yes, I've thought about several scenarios, but this is definitely like Zeus. Don't mention that name carelessly. Now that I'm about to die, can't I say anyone's name carelessly? Feeling the wind blowing through the forest, Alcmene let out a self-deprecating laugh. Soon, she looked at Ares, another son of Zeus. Which Heracles are you, the second, or the third? Ares did not answer. He knew his own position well. But it didn't matter anyway. Zeus's loyal sword. That was how Ares lived his life. Quietly offer your neck. The tip of Ares' sword pointed towards Alcmene. Thud. Heracles, eyes, bloodshot, gnashed his teeth. You will die by the hands of a giant. A weapon of war prepared for the gigantomachy. It was completed with the death of Heracles, mother, Alcmene. Chapter 163. Foo, pook. I felt like I was going crazy. Seeing my mother die in front of my eyes, I felt like my eyes were spinning. I was angry. Even though I knew it wasn't real, I wanted to find Ares and tear him to shreds. Stop it. My voice trembled. Even though it was small, there was no way that voice would reach Ares or Alcmene in front of me. Kwang, I told you to stop. I tried to crush the ground and spread mana around me, but the memory in the necklace did not disappear. Waak, red mana spread in all directions. Alcmene's mana still lingered and tormented Heracles' memory. Su. The scattered mana merged again. The image of Alcmene being stabbed by swords and spears no longer appeared. Instead, another memory of Alcmene began. I'll probably die. Two people were sitting face to face. Alcmene and her older sister, Elena. I've been thinking about why you left your son, whom you raised with weapons, in my arms. Why? What would Heracles' reaction be if I died? Elena's eyes widened at Alcmene's question. Through that question, Elena was able to realize why Zeus had left Heracles with Alcmene. So you're going to kill you? There's nothing else I can think of. Are you saying that you want me to leave your son and you alone? Aren't you thinking too much? Sister. Alcmene shook her head firmly. You don't know Zeus. There's no such thing as, just, for him. That can't be. Yoongae. A cry came from the inner room. It was the cry of Heracles, who was still a baby. Elena was startled and Alcmene got up from her seat. Elena hurriedly ran to the door and blocked Alcmene's way. Keep Heracles away, Alcmene. If Zeus's purpose was really that. Even though they were parents and children, the closer Alcmene got to Heracles, the closer she would get to death. Pretend you don't know. I'll find a nanny. Then you. I can't do that, sister. Alcmene looked beyond the door that Elena was blocking. The sound of a baby crying could still be heard. Heracles was calling for her. You'll die if you do. Even if that's the case, I can't. Why? He's my son. Is it because of your sense of responsibility? No, then, it's just that I love my son too much. Elena was speechless for a moment at that answer and bit her lip tightly. A mother who loves her son. No one in the world had the right to blame her for that. But now she was Alcmene's older sister, and she had to protect Alcmene. For that reason, Alcmene should not be with Heracles. That guy is just a weapon of war that Zeus planned. Do you think so too? Quack. Alcmene's eyes filled with strength as she glared at her older sister, Elena. She reached out to the door that Elena was blocking. Unlike Alcmene, who was a ranker, Elena, a player who had given up on the tower, did not have the strength to stop her. If that's the case, then you should be on that kid's side even more. Even if everyone else thinks that way, you shouldn't. Once Zeus made up his mind, the fate of that child was as good as set. No matter what he did, he would drive Heracles to the battlefield. Heracles would become a weapon of war and would kill countless giants, whether he wanted to or not. Jebuk, Alcmene, who had opened the door with difficulty, hugged Hercules, who was crying with his head on her shoulder. Mom, looking at him, he collapsed powerlessly on the floor as a grown man. Thank you, Hercules. Alcmene swarm eyes, still looking at the young him, made him feel so homesick. Thank you for being born as my son. Wah! The red mana enveloping Hercules changes with each passing moment. Perhaps inside, Hercules is seeing the truth he didn't know. Open hollow corner bracket. So that's what happened. Close hollow corner bracket. Gigant's voice reached his ears. Yu1 looked up and stared at them. Head also as tall that it made his neck itch. Looking up at Gigantes, who was as tall as the sky, made his neck hurt. Can she see everything? Alcmene's skill wasn't that great. It was just a skill that showed the memories stored in her voice as a single video. There was no way Gigantes, a giant comparable to the three divinities, couldn't understand such a skill of Alcmene's. Thank you. Open hollow corner bracket. What are you talking about? Close hollow corner bracket. Just for watching over us. I was a little worried that you might attack us, thinking this was a chance. Hercules, the giant slayer. It was perhaps one of the few chances to kill him. If he had taken this opportunity and attacked Hercules, Hercules and Gigantes might have fought here. Open hollow corner bracket. You commit great risk to clear up the misunderstanding between Hercules and our giants. I can't let those efforts go to waste. Close hollow corner bracket. Are you saying that you're grateful? Open hollow corner bracket. I'll have to wait and see a little longer. Close hollow corner bracket. You would have to wait and see. It means that would judge based on Hercules' reaction from now on. He seems to think a lot. Yu1 was also watching the memories in the necklace. He already knew the general story from hearing it, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. Gigantes is wavering. There was a reason why he gave the necklace, which he could have given earlier, at this moment. Hercules, the giant slayer, who had killed countless giants. Even if he stopped the giant slaughter after learning the truth, the fact that he was an enemy of the giants would not change. But what if it was revealed that Hercules' enmity toward the giants was because of Zeus? And if leader of the giants, Gigantes, saw that fact firsthand. Please help me, Alcmene. Her, who had died over 1,000 years ago, had the lives of hundreds of millions of people in her hands. In order to prevent the great war that would happen in the future, Alcmene's voice had to persuade Hercules and Gigantes. And so, while Yu1 was watching in the direction of Hercules. Rumble, Gigantes' gigantic head came down. A single pupil the size of a house, from a height of hundreds of meters, faced Yu1. Yu1 turned his head and, after a long moment, found Gigant's focus and looked at him. Why? Open hollow corner bracket. Yes. I remember. I heard it from Urfa. Close hollow corner bracket. Urfa, the giant's old high ranker he had met on the 20th floor, who had told him how to get the Stone of the Sea. It seemed that Gigantes had heard about Yu1 from him. Weren't you sleeping? Open hollow corner bracket. I wasn't going to sleep here the whole time. I woke up sometimes and listened to what was going on in the world. Close hollow corner bracket. Then why didn't you stop Hercules until now? Open hollow corner bracket here. Close hollow corner bracket. Gigantes raised his arm and showed his chest. A gnarled scar that could be seen between his chest and armpit. Open hollow corner bracket. This is a wound I got from Zeus lightning. It took a long time to heal. Close hollow corner bracket. You were injured. Is that why you were hiding? Open hollow corner bracket. I was sitting. Close hollow corner bracket. Gigantes lowered his raised arm and hid his wound again. Gigantes lowered the arm he had raised and hid his wound again. The mana that had spread like fog cleared, and Hercules' dull face appeared. Open hollow corner bracket. You beggar who was preparing for the next fight. The next fight, the second Gigantomachy. Unlike the first war, which was undeclared, the second Gigantomachy led to a war several times larger than the first. At first, I wondered why that was. Everyone put their heads together and thought about it, but there was no other reason they could think of other than Zeus setting the stage. But now I think I understand a little. It wasn't just Olympus that was preparing for war. It takes two hands to clap, and a war requires an opponent. Olympus, who was preparing for the second Gigantomachy. Just like Gigantes, the leader of the giants, said, they were also preparing for war. The giants will perish in the second gigantomachy. The giants were a race that occupied a significant portion of the tower's power. Because of the second gigantomachy, the giants perished, and several large guilds, including Olympus, suffered irreparable wounds. It was an event that greatly reduced the tower's power. It's better to win the war against Olympus. The best thing is for the war not to happen at all. Gigantes' judgment was important for that reason. The man in front of him was an existence that held the key to the war, just like Zeus of Olympus. Open hollow corner bracket From what I saw when you coolly attacked Poseidon, you must be an enemy of Olympus. That's right. Open hollow corner bracket So are you on our side? No, that's not it. Open hollow corner bracket Puha. You're as clueless as I've heard. Gigantes looked at Yuan and laughed strangely. His laughter was so loud that it sounded like a natural disaster to Yuan's ears. Gigantes looked at Yuan, who was covering his ears, with curious eyes. Open hollow corner bracket Everything you've done is out of the ordinary, climbing the tower this quickly, taking the item from Ares, and finding this place that even Olympus couldn't find. And yet, despite all that, you're standing here between me and the giant killer. Even if you took each of his accomplishments separately, they were by no means ordinary. His skills already surpassed those of most rankers. He had acquired the stone of the sea that Poseidon had been looking for and taken the item that Ares had. And because of that, he had revealed the truth to Hercules and Gigantes. Open hollow corner bracket Right here, you've made history. Making history. It was a grand statement, but Yuan didn't feel that way. No, to be precise, it was wrong. What he was doing wasn't making history but changing it. I'm a little great. Open hollow corner bracket You haven't learned humility. If only you had that, you'd be perfect. Whether he minded Yuan's reaction of covering his ears because of his loud voice, Gigantes laughed more quietly than before. Open hollow corner bracket Anyway, you're an enemy of Olympus, but you're not on either side, which means you're neutral. Not siding with either side means that you won't have anyone to help you when you're in danger. Don't worry, I'm popular even without that. Open hollow corner bracket Are you really okay with that? Yeah, thinking about what he had to do in the future, he had to do it that way. To Yuan, the power of a group was like a poison chalice. In the end, the power of the group would hold Yuan back, and instead of giving him greater power, it would take away his freedom. Freedom, that was Yuan's greatest strength. No guild could have more charm than that. Open hollow corner bracket If that's what you want, I can't stop you. Fortunately, Gigantes didn't force an answer. Instead of feeling sorry for Yuan's answer, he rolled his eyes and looked around for Hercules. Open hollow corner bracket Then now close hollow corner bracket. Wah-ah-ahk. The red mana was sucked back into the necklace. Open hollow corner bracket It's that guy's turn to choose. The mana that had spread like fog dissipated, and Hercules with a dazed expression appeared. Chapter 164. A blank face. Contrary to expectations, no tears came out. Perhaps because he didn't feel a sense of reality, Heracles stood there expressionlessly and raised his fist. Pow! Heracles hit his own face with his fist. With all his might, enough to crush even a rock into dust. Thud! He hit his face, again and again. No matter how sturdy his body was, there was no way he could be unscathed from hitting his own face with his own hand. His lips burst and his eyes swelled up. Heracles didn't stop his fist even though it must have hurt quite a bit. Stop it, now! A voice rang out from nearby. Yuan was standing right before his nose. Heracles stopped punching and stared ahead for a moment, his eyes focusing. That's perfect. What is this? Did you say you took it from Ares? Yuan nodded, and Heracles' gaze changed. Where is that bastard right now? Having stayed on the 38th floor for a long time and fighting giants, he didn't know where Ares' temple was. Just by looking at his eyes that were blazing with murderous intent, one could tell what he wanted. He's dead. Dead. You killed him. Yes, I've gotten my revenge on that bastard. Heracles lifted his head and looked at Gigantes. I'm sorry. Swish. Heracles knelt down. Gigantes' eyes looked down at Heracles. Up until now, I've been mistaken and killed your family. I'm truly sorry. The false information that the giants killed Alcmene. Heracles had been fooled by it and had killed countless giants until now. Because of that, he had earned the title of Giant Slayer, and had worn it like a badge of honor. But now, the title, Giant Slayer, was an indelible shame to him. Are you sincere? If you ask me to give you my life, I will. Heracles' eyes flashed with the same madness as when he first faced Gigantes. But not now. Are you going to find Zeus? Yes. The target of Heracles' revenge had changed. Not the giants, but Zeus. And beyond that, to Olympus. This is a success for now. Heracles was the strongest card Zeus had. Even just looking at his current ranking, he was higher than Poseidon and Hades, so there was no doubt about his abilities. Furthermore, the Heracles that Yuan knew reached an even higher ranking than Zeus in the future. I will kill my father and come back for my retribution later. I see. Gigantes, eyes closed. The mana that had been surrounding him ever since he faced Heracles had now subsided. He no longer recognized Heracles as an enemy. I cannot forgive you myself. How many of my kin have died? A body without color. Open hollow corner bracket. However, you and your mother are victims like us. Close hollow corner bracket. The blood shed by Olympus and Zeus. Alcmene, the mother of Hercules, and Hercules, her son who had lived an unwanted life, were included. Open hollow corner bracket. At least I will not punish you. Still, if you want to pay for what happened, even a little, make sure you do it. Close hollow corner bracket. What? Open hollow corner bracket. Olympus. Close hollow corner bracket. Thud. Aegis, who had turned around, sat down again and returned to the form of a mountain. Open hollow corner bracket. Destroy it completely. Close hollow corner bracket. After finishing his words, Aegis fell back into a long sleep as if he had no more business. At those words, Hercules paused, kneeling for a moment. Aegis crouched down again, becoming like a high mountain. I understand. Hercules, who answered those words, got up from his seat. Soon after, he put Alcmene's necklace around his neck. Clank. A red necklace around his neck. Hercules looked around the playground. Thank you. I owe you a debt. He made Hercules, the top ranker of the tower, owe him. The fact that he changed direction was good for Wu 1 as well, but this favor would become an even greater strength for Wu 1 in the future. I will definitely repay this debt later. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been able to stop the fight with Aegis. Hercules knew what the outcome of that fight would be. The death of Aegis, who was in the same position as the three gods of Olympus, was highly likely to lead to the second gigantomachy. Nevertheless, he had come to him to avenge Alcmene. If you think so, you can lend me a hand later. Thank you for saying that. You don't have to be so grateful, it's much better than speaking that way. Are you going to fight Olympus? I plan to. The direction had definitely changed. It seemed conflicting to fight Olympus, where his father was, but he had grown up under Alcmene in the first place. The bond between Zeus and his father, and the affection between father and son, had been severed by Zeus himself in the first place. Zeus had tried to move Hercules' fist with Alcmene's death, and in the end, that karma would come back to him. Then I'll give you a good present to cheer you up. A present? Here. Waik. Magic power surged up through Wu 1's shadow. Magic power enveloping all sides. Hercules frowned at the ominous magic power. What are you trying to do? Just stay still and watch. Swoosh. A vortex appeared before Hercules' eyes. This is a present. He wasn't very wary. Anyway, Wu 1's skills wouldn't be able to harm him. More than anything, he already recognized Wu 1 as an ally. Squirm, squirm. The shadow began to squirm. After a while, it took on the form of a person. Who is this? Who is this? Ares had killed Heracles' mother, Alcmene, on Zeus's orders, so he had avoided meeting Heracles until now. A body without color. The man wearing black armor and with unfocused eyes looked somewhat familiar. He looks like my father. Zeus, the greatest being that Heracles knew. The black man created by the specter before his eyes closely resembled him. It's Ares. What? Heracles was startled. Ares. His unfocused eyes didn't even have a soul. However, the face that resembled Zeus added credibility to the claim that he was Ares. Can't the dead get revenge? Is that possible? It is possible. Clack. Quinn's eyes opened. Wide open eyes. He couldn't go straight to hell like before, but the title of Spectre and Quinn's power allowed him to summon a part of it. King of the dead, faces his world. Summoning, hell. A vast sea where the dead existed. A tiny part of it surrounded them. As Heracles tried to summon his magic power because of the strange eeriness, he noticed that Ares' eyes were focusing. Ares turned his head and found Spectre. You bastard. He found Spectre and immediately reached for his waist. There was no black sword. Without panicking, Ares charged at Spectre. He intended to fight with his fists since he didn't have a sword. However, the dead worship you. Thud. Ares knelt down without realizing it. Ares kneeled before Spectre. Unlike Arthur, he hadn't submitted, but his soul already belonged to Spectre. Moreover, the dead couldn't go against Spectre, who had the title, King of the Dead. The pain, clang, Spectre's sword was drawn. I decide it. Stab, quote exclamation mark quote. Ares, eyes widened. Thanks to his long-trained mental strength, he didn't scream, but he clenched his teeth to hold back the scream. He didn't have a physical body. However, pain wasn't something you could only feel through your body in the first place. Your soul is weaker than your body. However, depending on the person, the soul becomes stronger and harder. King of the Dead, he had learned about the dead, the living, and the soul after obtaining that title. We usually call that mental strength. Mental strength. It was a measure of the hardness of the soul. Ordinary people had weak minds that could be easily broken, but it was different for high rankers like Ares. How much more pain would he have to inflict for his mind to break? The soul wasn't easily broken. And that was why Spectre could help Heracles get his revenge. Beat him as much as you want. At Spectre's words, Ares' head turned back. Soon, his eyes opened wide. Heracles. He was looking down at him with terrifying eyes. With his fearsome eyes, he looked down at him. Then just take as much as you've taken until now. Due to Zeus's orders, Ares, who killed Heracles' mother, Alcmene, has avoided Heracles until now. Because it's possible inside here. Thank you. Thud, Heracles released his hand as if he was preparing himself mentally. And then, now, go to SLE. Crack, poof, Ares' body burst out and a horrible scream echoed. Oh my god. Ares' soul was crushed under Heracles' repeated punches and restored by his mental power. Repeated several times, Heracles brought his fist to Ares' eyes and said, "Apologize for your wrongdoings." I refuse. He had extraordinary mental power. He didn't apologize even after experiencing the pain of his body being crushed and bursting repeatedly. Even Enyo, who was watching from the side, felt so disgusted that she gagged, so you can imagine how Heracles felt. Oh yeah, whung, crack, Ares' soul was crushed again. That's fortunate, he wasn't going to stop even if he apologized. But thanks to that, Heracles was able to beat Ares more freely and comfortably. How much time passed like that? Crack, squish, pop. Wah. Ares, who had been gritting his teeth and enduring, finally started screaming. How stubborn. Anyway, there was nowhere for Ares to run away. Already dead, he couldn't commit suicide, and he couldn't run away without Enyo's permission. In the end, his mental power would collapse and he would either be destroyed or submit. A warrior is not supposed to fear death. Crack. Enyo watched the scene of the beating with her arms crossed. Then, what about annihilation? That's enough. Ares' scream didn't stop Heracles' fist. Crack. Poof. Once again, his soul burst out. Unlike the first time, Ares' soul didn't recover quickly and slowly returned to its original form. His whole body was muddy and trembling as Ares laid his head on the floor. The last remaining pride of a warrior. I'm sorry. That was the moment it was broken. Obtained the submission of the warrior of war and strife. Proficiency of the King of the Dead increases. A similar message to when he obtained Arthur's loyalty. This is unexpected, to think that he could induce submission with such a simple method. It started as something to satisfy his friend, but it created a pleasant variable. I'm sorry, Heracles asked without lowering his fist. Once was hard, twice was easy. Ares nodded his head in a hurry. Why, yes, I'm sorry, I was wrong, is that so, then? Heracles hesitated. Ares' expression showed relief for a moment. But, whung, crack, with one punch, Ares' head flew off again. Then now, get hit exactly as much as you've been hit until now. Chapter 165. Just because his fighting spirit was broken didn't mean that Ares' soul would vanish right away. Above all, the problem was the time limit of the summoning of the underworld, which Yuan could maintain. It's the first time I've maintained it for this long. Yuan looked at Heracles, who was slamming his fists into Ares' soul, which hadn't fully regenerated yet. He swung his fists almost as if he was going mad. It was understandable, even though the root cause was Zeus, Heracles had just seen the memories of the necklace. Ares, sword piercing through Alcmene's body. Having witnessed that scene with his own eyes, Heracles wouldn't be satisfied even if he ripped Ares apart several times. He won't be satisfied with just this much. His breath grew ragged. Thud, Heracles' fist grew stronger once again. I hope it lessens the burden a little. Bang, Ares' body exploded once again. His soul was torn apart to the point where it was unrecognizable. The soul of the warrior of war and conflict is in danger. Rest is required. Magic power is insufficient. Both Ares' soul and Yuan's magic power were reaching their limits. Heracles stood still and waited for Ares' soul to return to its original form. Just then, Yuan approached Heracles, who was half conscious. End it now, just a little bit more. It's getting hard for me now. Crack, creak, the summoned space shook unsteadily. Only then did Heracles realize that Yuan had been using his skills to maintain Ares' soul and allow him to stay in this state. Furthermore, since Yuan was a necromancer, he also needed his mana to restore the torn soul. You've been holding on for too long. Tell me when you need it. I'll let you hit him again. At those words, Ares, who was gradually returning to his original form, flinched. However, Heracles shook his head at those words. No, that's enough. This is it. Is it enough? No, it's far from enough. Heracles' eyes still burned with a hot glare. He glanced at Ares, who was trembling, and clenched and unclenched his fists, which were involuntarily filling with strength, as he continued speaking. But that guy isn't the only one I'm going to beat up. Right, Ares may have been the one to directly kill Alcmene, but that was only a small part of what led to her death. Numerous individuals were involved in her death. Ares, Zeus, Hera, and the other Olympians who were Zeus's followers. I don't think it'll end until I smash all their heads in. I've done everything I can to that guy. Should I help? No. What could you possibly do to help with your skills? I know quite a few things. Heracles' eyes flashed. Strictly speaking, there were ways to help him other than fighting alongside him. What else do you know? Who's allied with whom? Information that could be useful to Heracles. And who agreed to kill Alcmene? Of course, he had learned all that information through Heracles himself. You're free to believe the story or not. But don't you think it's worth checking out? Tell me. Wu Yun explained the allies and enemies to Heracles. It would be problematic if Heracles were to blindly attack Olympus while blinded by rage. In fact, after the second Gigantomachy ended, Heracles had blindly attacked the Olympians after learning of Alcmene's death. What Heracles needed right now was the ability to separate friend from foe. So whatever you do, don't go after Zeus first. You won't be able to defeat him on your own yet. He might be able to later on, but the current Heracles couldn't be guaranteed to defeat Zeus. No, even if he thought he could win, Wu Yun would have stopped him anyway. He couldn't let Heracles, who didn't have an immortal body like Sun Ogong, participate in such an uncertain battle. Destroying Olympus. A plan centered around Hades. By changing Heracles' mind, the plan was more than halfway complete. It was a recklessly ambitious name, but after hearing Wu Yun's story, Heracles didn't think it was impossible. However, I understand the plan, but you're not telling me to wait around for it, are you? Of course not. Wu Yun shook his head. If that were the case, he probably would have stopped him first. Now go and smash as you please. Without holding back, everything. Creak, the corners of his mouth went up. Turning his body, Heracles looked back at Yuan and asked. Can you come up on your own? Go ahead first. Good reflexes. Thud, strength entered the legs of Heracles standing on the ground. Then I'll go first. Contact me. Boom, putting strength into his feet, Heracles jumped up to the ceiling that had been pierced. The floor caved in, and the ground shook like an earthquake for a moment. Heracles, who went out through the hell summoned by Yuan, went up to the ceiling that he had broken through. It's still noisy when you move. Creak, was it because of the shock just now? Yuan's mana that was surrounding him shook. The summoned hell became unstable, and Ares felt relieved. Just then, do we still have something to talk about? Swish, Yuan looked at Ares and lowered his body. Then, a terrifying light burst from Ares' eyes. I had forgotten that you were a necromancer. Relax your eyes. When you speak nicely, how dare you? Hey, Heracles, wait, Ares shouted urgently. The emotion felt through the soul. Even he, who was not afraid of death, was now cowering and terrified. It was understandable. Until just now, he was the one who felt the pain of his body being torn and blown away by Heracles countless times, unable to die alive. Although he had returned, thinking that his revenge against Ares was over, Heracles would throw a punch at Ares whenever Yuan asked him to. Wait, Yuan looked at Ares as if it was the end. There was something more to say. The hesitation was brief. I understand. That's right. The desired response came immediately. Apparently, he was quite scared of Heracles. Well, even if it wasn't just pain, it would be terrifying to face Heracles with his eyes twisted back. Anyway, I can do that if I'm going to use you as an undead without a mind. Ares hung his head. Even in the tower, the rare necromancers had the ability to restrain the souls of their opponents and turn them into mindless undead. The same was true for the existence in front of him. Wouldn't it be better to fight with your own will than to fight unwillingly? Are you asking for a pledge of allegiance? Then at least you'll be able to swing your sword with your own will. The souls of the high rankers were precious. Especially a talented high ranker like Ares. If possible, Eugene wanted to make him a complete undead. Don't refuse. As expected, you are the enemy of Olympus. No matter how scary Heracles is, I can't point my sword at my father and mother with my own will. To Heracles, they were all people who deserved to die, but to Ares, Zeus and Hera were his parents who had given birth to and raised him. No matter how much Heracles was feared, it was difficult to think that a high ranker like Ares would point his sword at them himself. It was a natural result. At times like this, instead of resorting to futile threats and persuasion, negotiation was necessary. Then I have no choice but to use you in the war like this. Ares' eyes flickered. Perhaps he was thinking about his future. He had used the whip, so now it was time for the carrot. But if you help me, at least I'll leave you out of the fight with Olympus. Really, it was a question that came a beat too late, but it was a bite. He had to catch it here. I promise on the system. Let's make a contract, you and me. Requesting an oath contract. Upon completion of the contract, the soul will be, completely, bound to the player. If the contract is broken, the soul will be set free. A contract between an undead and a necromancer. A promise that was safer than anything, bound by the system. Will you accept? 77th floor. The Temple of Hera, the high ranker and first wife of Zeus. It was known as the place where the most rankers stayed in Olympus. The splendor of the temple was the best among the factions of Olympus, and the wealth that had been accumulated over a long time was unfathomable. Aside from the three gods, she was the existence with the most power and authority in Olympus. She was Hera, a garden and gate as wide as a castle. As they strolled, the rankers enjoyed the peaceful weather. Is Hera still not here? No news. She's been gone for a while this time. Things have been a bit chaotic lately. Even if a loach muddies the water, it gets really murky. The rumors about Kim Yu-won were quite well known. Although they did not know the exact details, the rankers who knew about it were aware that Zeus and Poseidon had split because of it. One of the three pillars had collapsed. The rankers who followed Poseidon went into hiding or left the guild, and there was a strange atmosphere between Hades, another one of the three pillars, and Zeus. Who would have thought that the three pillars would scatter like this? Who would have known that another one would come out like this? I heard that the other two joined hands and made the first move. Yes, I heard that too. The rumors were rampant. But even if the rumors were true, it was not a big problem. It's a fight with an obvious outcome anyway. Yes, we have a war hero on our side. Zeus, one of the three pillars, and Heracles. In addition, Poseidon was still imprisoned in Asgard's prison. Zeus's power was still strong, and he was still like Olympus itself. Still, if a fight breaks out, it will be a big war. Yes, one of the rankers looked up at the sky. The clouds floated serenely. It feels like the calm before the storm. Were those words the beginning? Kwang, what is it? An intruder. The wall surrounding the temple collapsed, and thick smoke rose into the air. On top of the collapsed wall, the silhouette of a large man appeared. One person. How dare he? Where does he think this is? The moment an angry ranker tried to step forward. Wait, the oldest ranker blocked him with his hand. That silhouette, it was an unforgettable sight. A hero who carried a club and wore a lion's skin, and who roamed the battlefield. Kwang, he smashed the temple fence again with his fist and shouted. Where are you, Hera? Boo, a thunderous voice that seemed to burst eardrums. Mantheus, a ranker of the Hera temple who knew him, muttered. Heracles, the hero of the Gigantomachy, Heracles, has broken into Hera's temple. Chapter 166. I'm glad I heard that. Kwang, temple the wall, it was broken. Collapsed fence. On the floor crushed corpse and turned over earth. Patter. Dangerously shaking temple and several rankers gathered together. The middle, Hera temple belonging to ranker Mantheus Hercules faced. Why like this, are you afraid? How? He is almost wool thing same, it was a face. Around you dozens name rankers there was, the opponent is it was Hercules. This degree by number of people him stop it number there wasn't. Hera take me come, the answer is it was still the same. Maybe already count listen last days will be. Hera bring me. Roaring blazing the look in your eyes suddenly the temple hid it breaking appearance if you look simple greetings not at least something egg number there was. He is here not you are there. Okay. For a moment I was worried Hercules look up nodded. Then temple all if it breaks it will come. Simple and clear answer. Jepic. Hercules in place gathered rankers toward one step approached. 32 number of people. This if it's all more gathered crab good it's going to happen. The distance one step let's get closer, Mantheus' spine I got creepy. 300 number of people degree if it happens, a little hold on it might be worth it I don't know. 300 number of people. That too every ranker keep in mind leave it mentioned it was a number. Someone snort in between bluff they say they're manipulating me I'll tell you Mantheus is now this say simple it's a bluff here did. No, rather this bravado not it was humility. At Gigantomachia see June only active even if here there is the rankers all of a sudden it will end it's going to happen. But that's right surrender son should I do it? No, surrender do even if it was a problem. How what days if there was eyes like that float? Bloody it was snow, never I'll take a look won't think same atmosphere. In front of you there is Hercules at Gigantomachia Mantheus saw figure it was the same. Gulp, like that Mantheus inside halfway fight I was giving up at the time. War hero too it's an old saying. Chuck. On Olympus new came indifference ranker, Hector from now on came out. The era changed. Cloth year during activities summer solstice not old-fashioned the relics now stop to the back room go away. With a helmet head wrap it around, all over your body argent armor wrapped around Hector as Hercules toward approached. He is for sure quite high of ranking was a ranker. Furthermore his around you at 30 reaching rankers there is situation. Look, Mantheus is that Hector hurry dissuaded. Now rather than fighting through conversation need to solve son. The opponent is it's Hercules. No matter what Hercules handle, this is Rankerman 30 it's over. Number. That in a trap deceived die liver people how much a lot it would be, Hector is that learn couldn't seems like it seemed. On Olympus support requested. Maybe how much it passes by no addition number of people to arrive I will. I requested reinforcements from Olympus. Additional personnel should be arriving shortly. It has begun. That sounds like welcome news. Heracles folded his arms as he listened to Mantheus's whisper. As if to say that he could take on even more. How can anyone stand for such a thing? Hector approached Heracles with his sword and shield raised. Even if I must die, I shall challenge you. Bzzz. From quite a distance, Heracles' fist shot forward. And in that instant, clang, the air crackled as Hector's armor shattered into pieces. Bang, Hector flew through the air. He did not have time for last words or anything else. The other rankers watched Hector fly away, becoming a dot in the sky, their mouths agape. How far did he fly? In one hit, a high ranker who was closest to the upper rankers. Hector was a promising prospect recently favored by Olympus. It was said that even without any lineage, he might be able to form his own faction in the future if he did well. And yet, that Hector had been sent flying with a single blow. Thud, let us begin now. Boom, 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 boom. As his foot hit the ground, the temple, which had already been damaged, began to collapse. Destroy Olympus. The contract has been completed. You have received the loyalty of the warrior of war and strife. The warrior of war and strife's power will be restored. The soul in question cannot participate in battles against players affiliated with Olympus. Click. Ares, who had completed the contract, knelt before Yuan. A pledge of loyalty, just like Arthur's. I never thought I'd see the day. Ares, who was known as the crazy bastard of the high rankers, was kneeling before him, not Zeus. Although he could not participate in the battle against Olympus, Ares in his prime would be a great asset to Yuan at this point in time. Yuan took a short break to recover his depleted mana and ascended to the ceiling. Days passed since he had finished his business on the 38th floor and returned. Buzz. Inside his inventory, the player kit vibrated. Hargan, did you really succeed? Yuan, who had just woken up from sleep, replied. What's the matter, Hargan? Hera's temple has been attacked. By Heracles. I told you to attack first. He's on our side now. Yuan tried to put the player kit away after sending his reply. In that moment, Jing, Hargan, what, really? Hargan, no, how did you even do that? Are you crazy, Heracles, seriously? Hargan, I know you're crazy, but how on earth did you persuade Heracles? Messages kept ringing without end. He seemed quite surprised. Yuan thought about replying, but then he stopped. It wouldn't be a very productive conversation. Since Heracles had attacked Hera's temple, figuring out what had happened would not be difficult even without an explanation. It started. The attack on Hera's temple was the first target, thanks to the information given by Hargan. All those related to Alcmene's death. Of them, Hera was the one most involved in Alcmene's death, apart from Zeus and Ares. Rather than killing everyone unconditionally on Olympus, it's better to intercept them one by one. I've also sent their approximate locations to the player kit. On Olympus, the only ranker who could stop Hercules was Zeus. No, even if you searched the entire tower, there wouldn't be many rankers who could stop him. The destruction of Olympus has begun. Now, all that's left is to prepare. Geeing. The vibration started again. It was definitely the same vibration, but it felt different this time. Hargan took out the player kit and checked the message. Hades. Preparations are complete. The message I've been waiting for. After confirming it, Hargan replied to the message from Hargan that he had ignored earlier. We'll start now. Hargan, as the son of Zeus, the player who would later lead the destruction of Olympus. Hargan, start. Didn't it already start? That's not it. Now was the time to finally recoup the investment he had made in Hargan. There's something I need your help with. The sky was covered with gray clouds. The sky, which had been clear all year round, was unusually gray today. Thud, thud, the throne of heaven, the temple of Zeus, the king of Olympus. Athena, the throne of war and wisdom, who visited the place, looked for her father. I've been waiting for you. The rankers guarding the temple stepped aside at Athena's visit. Even if it was Poseidon, the three gods, who would have prevented a unilateral visit, allowed Athena's visit for one reason. Was it arranged in advance? This situation felt unfamiliar. A sense of crisis I had never felt before. I wondered if the impregnable tower of Olympus, which had been built up over thousands of years, might really collapse. The sky is gray. Rumble, crash, even the sky thundered. It was the first time Athena had seen such a sky in this world. Are you very angry? Gulp. He was the father who had given birth to her and raised her, but at this moment, she was afraid of Zeus. No, I was always afraid of it anyway. Zeus was the strongest and most ruthless of all the rankers she knew. But compared to now, he was as gentle as a lamb. Athena walked down the corridor and arrived at the center of the temple where Zeus was staying. Zeus, back, looking down at the pond. Are you here? The pitch of his voice was the same as usual. However, Athena could tell that he was in a bad mood. The sky above the vaulted ceiling, which was larger than his expression or voice, told her that. Ares is dead. Yes. You said Hercules destroyed the temple. Yes. This is getting complicated. Athena was naturally taken aback. How troublesome. Even when relations with Asgard went awry, and when she personally threw Poseidon into their prison to avoid war, he had never said that. No, it was something that Athena had never heard him utter in any of the past histories she could remember. The almighty Zeus was troubled. I will gather troops immediately. I will gather Dionysus and Apollo, and Hermes. Apollo is not my subordinate. He knew that Apollo was in contact with Hargan. He had allowed that to happen. However, things had changed since Hargan met with Hades. Are you talking about my uncle contacting them? Yes. Is Heracles' betrayal related to that? At first, I thought so. Zeus's gaze turned to the side. However, there was no need to go that far. Yes. Do you know who killed Ares? She did. She had heard the news and had personally seen Ares' crumbling temple. She did not know how shocked she had been. A player who had just reached the 40th floor. She had heard many stories about him, but he had already gained enough power to face one of Olympus's factions. However, is it related to the heavenly demon? Athena had not yet evaluated Wu Jin that highly. She was more concerned about the heavenly demon's avatar next to him. It was said that he had the strength of a high ranker, but she was confident that she could handle Wu Jin and his avatar. She wondered how Zeus would see it. However, the heavenly demon, he must be like Heracles. What do you mean? There is something. Ares had died, and Heracles had betrayed them. There was only one causal relationship between the two people that he had never seen in his life. In the current situation, Zeus could guess why Heracles had betrayed them. Was it groundwork to attract Heracles? He did not know how he had learned about Alcmene, but he seemed to be quite intelligent. Olympus had already suffered an incurable wound. They could not afford to just sit and watch. Athena, a solemn call. Creak. Yes, your majesty. Athena knelt before him like a loyal subject awaiting orders. However, Zeus was not looking at Athena. He was looking at the surface of the well, which was calm despite the wind. Attack the Celestial Horse Guild. Athena's pupils shook. The Celestial Horse Guild. It was the only guild known to be related to Wu Jin. What are you talking about? Yes, At this point, there was only one reason why Olympus would get involved with the Celestial Horse Guild. We will lure Kim Woo-jin first. That was the moment he became Zeus's target. Chapter 167. Athena remained silent for a moment. It was difficult to answer. The Heavenly Demon cult has the Heavenly Demon. He was clearly a high ranker who hadn't been active for a long time. However, he was an existence that had made a name for himself as a high ranker long before the Gigantomachi. Furthermore, behind Kim Woo-won is the avatar of the Heavenly Emperor. The Heavenly Demon, and the Heavenly Emperor. Moreover, even if it was just Kim Woo-won, one had to assume he was more skilled than Ares. In that state, making the Heavenly Demon cult an enemy and fighting them wasn't a very good choice in terms of military power. On this side, we'll need at least 4 high rankers including myself. Take Hermes. I'll decide on another one by tomorrow. If it's one person, it's about time to let her out too. Athena's eyes flashed. Seeing him use the word, let out, there was only one person who came to mind. Really, she's probably waiting. She'll want to come out and play. She doesn't suit the battlefield that well. I know. Zeus stood up from the pond and rose from his seat. He averted his gaze from the pond and continued speaking as he left the seat. That's why I'll have to step back for a while when fighting with her. Athena turned her head and looked at the pond Zeus had been looking at. A calm water surface. What were you looking at? Since becoming the king of Olympus, Zeus, who had severely restricted his outside activities, saw the world he wanted to see through this pond. At a time like this, when Olympus was shaking, what on earth had he been looking at? Now that Zeus was gone, Athena, as if drawn to something, looked at her reflection in the pond. 42nd floor, hell. Among them, in the deepest part, Hargan was able to meet the person he had been waiting for. I can hear you from afar. The deepest part of the underground. Of course, not only Cerberus, but all the monsters that inhabited hell, even the more dangerous ones, came out. In a place where even rankers were reluctant to enter, the two met. You're late. Woo-won, who was sitting on a rock, was looking at the time displayed on his player kit. I ran hard. The path from the top to the bottom is a bit blocked. What kind of traffic jam? Traffic jam, what's that? There is such a thing. Woo-won shrugged and got up from his seat. As it was the lowest space, it was dark all around. Hargan looked around, surrounded by dim light, and asked. But isn't this dangerous? It's too low. Crackle. The background brightened. Several spheres of shining electricity floated around Woo-won. That moment, Hargan discovered the corpses of monsters that had been hidden in the darkness until now. What's with this many? A few hundred. No, it seemed like it could be 1,000. It seemed like they had gathered after smelling the blood to eat Woo-won. All the monsters nearby seemed to have gathered. In this empty field where not even a single blade of grass grew, Woo-won had cleaned up all the monsters and was waiting for him. It doesn't seem like you called me here to have a friendly chat. At Hargan's words, Woo-won nodded. I said I had something for you to help with. So, what is it? What floor are you up to now? Now, 61st floor. That's fast. Fast, is it? If I hadn't been so busy lately, I probably would have gone up faster. Unlike Woo-won, Hargan focused on climbing the tower as quickly as possible. Although Woo-won was climbing the tower at a speed that was hard to find a precedent for, in terms of speed alone, Hargan was faster than Woo-won. You have it too, don't you? This. Crackle. Spheres of electricity floating in the air. Woo-won pointed to the piece of lightning he had created with his eyes. Yes, then, crack, yellow lightning began to flow through Hargan's body. Unlike Woo-won's, which he had gained as a reward for the trial, it was an ability mixed into Hargan's genes. A purer, more complete skill. If he were to simply compare the quality and quantity of magic power, Woo-won's power was stronger, but the skill's proficiency was incomparable. But why this? Are you prepared to fight your father? Hargan's eyes widened for a moment before returning to normal. Woo-won referred to the fight with Zeus as a fight with father. He was asking if he was prepared to take a different path from his father. Why are you asking me that? Do you think I'm going to hesitate? I asked just in case. No, I'm not, even if he is my father. And I'm grateful that he gave birth to me, but my mother is the one who raised me. Hargan, who answered without hesitation, had a slightly bitter expression on his face. And besides, if you look at my brother Heracles. Heracles, a weapon of war for Olympus created and planned by Zeus. After Heracles' change of heart, Hargan had asked Woo-won about Heracles, and after hearing the answer, Hargan was filled with complex emotions. He wondered if he was the same. The Olympus I saw is a place where purpose and results are more important than cause or justice. They used whatever means necessary for that purpose, without knowing the extent. Are you going to change that? At least my mother taught me that I should. The corners of Yuan's mouth rose. It was not a very long conversation. But at least with this conversation alone, he could be sure. He hasn't changed. He wondered if maybe, with his intervention, the Hargan he knew in the future and the current Hargan would be different. But he hadn't changed. No, rather, he grew into the Hargan that Yuan knew even faster. Now, there was something else that was lacking. I have something for you to help with. Me, what is it? Your father. The fight with Zeus. Hargan's pupils instantly widened. You'll participate in that as well. Are you crazy? Hargan's voice rose. It wasn't because he was afraid of dying or anything like that. Why would I do that? You or me no, without you. This is a mistake. Anyway, what help can I give in that fight? He hurriedly recalled the two things, the corpses of the monsters scattered around him and the victory he had won in the fight with Ares. Hargan changed the subject, talking nonsense. But the conclusion was no different. Don't you have any confidence? I have to put my pride aside. Confidence. Who would I dare have that in front of? Considering his opponent, it was understandable. Zeus. He was the king of Olympus in its very essence. In a fight with him, Hargan was nothing more than a handful of dust. Zeus. The king of Olympus, the throne of heaven, the master of lightning. He has many names. His current ranking is 9th. Yuan recited some basic information about Zeus. Rank 9th. Of course, that was only at the moment. Later on, he rose to 5th place. It was a rare upward trend among the top-ranked high-rankers. It was said that even though Olympus's power had weakened in the future, Zeus's own power had grown stronger. You know him well. No, you don't know. In this tower, do you know how high a rank 9th is? I know, I do. He probably knew better than anyone. In this era, there were few who had met as many top-ranked high-rankers as Yuan. So, are you saying that you can't fight him face to face because you're no match for him right now? It's not that I can't, it's just that it's a meaningless fight. It's meaningful. Crackle. Yuan's electricity surged and mixed with Hargan's. Definitely, I know you're not the type to talk nonsense. Hargan let out a long sigh. It didn't make sense. But the Yuan in front of him had always done the things that didn't make sense. Maybe, just maybe, he might be able to do it this time too. What's the basis for this? There are two reasons, which one do you want to hear first? Does the order matter? Yes, the first reason creates the second reason. Then why don't you tell me in that order? Why ask? Because you'll be shocked. Prepare your heart and listen. I'll be shocked. Why? Because you are. One of the two reasons that Yuan chose Hargan. The only child that Zeus loves. With just that one reason, he was the key that could determine the fate of Olympus. They were cruel words. He was telling me to fight my loving father. Hargan was more surprised than ever at Yuan's words and denied them. But whether he believed it or not didn't matter. Even if it was true, the fact that Zeus was wrong didn't change. However, I wonder if I'll make the same choice even knowing this. Yuan looked at Hargan, who was sitting in the middle of the monsters' bodies. Crackle, crackle, the electricity shook unsteadily. It was proof that Hargan's emotions were unstable. Yuan couldn't answer Hargan's question of, why? But it was definitely true. Hargan must be having all sorts of thoughts right now, including whether or not what Yuan said was true. I'm going crazy. Hargan opened his mouth for the first time in hours, scratching his head. Yuan approached Hargan again and asked, have you sorted out your thoughts? There's nothing to sort out. I don't even know if what you said is true. If you don't believe me, then there's nothing I can say. No, actually, I believe you. The things you've said have been strangely accurate. That's usually how it is. You must be proud. Did you come from the future or something? Yuan shrugged his shoulders and gave a vague answer. Of course, he felt a little hurt inside. Anyway, let's say I believe you. What's going to change? Only my heart, if anything. That's why I'm asking you how your heart has changed. I'll fight. That won't change. The result still didn't change. But it will still hurt. If my father loves me. If I help bring down such a father. Hargan's tone was calmer than he expected. He might have sorted out his thoughts, or maybe he still wasn't feeling it yet. Either way, his answer remained the same. But we can't have a war. We can't have hundreds of thousands, millions of people dying in a meaningless war. Then that's good. Then let's go out now. The conversation that had been cut off for a while resumed. What's the second reason you need me? It was then that Hargan forcibly resumed the conversation. Jeeing. The player kit in Hargan's arms rang. Just a moment. Hargan hurriedly checked his player kit since he had been getting a lot of important messages lately. The moment he checked the message that had arrived. Hey, Hargan's expression hardened, and he turned the player kit around to show the screen to Yuan. Look at this. And inside it was. Apollo. Father has ordered an attack on the heavenly demon cult. Apollo. Your friend, I heard he's the great mage there. There was a more urgent matter for Yuan than Hargan. Chapter 168. Hair that seemed to coexist with gold and red. With distinct features and clear skin that seemed to glow. A man holding a lyre in one hand, Apollo asked his sister Artemis. Is that guy going to be okay? Harkan. Black hair and black eyes. A beautiful woman with short bob hair and thin, long arms crossed. Artemis shook her head at Apollo's answer of, yes. How can he be okay? In a situation like this. He made difficult friends, of all people. One close friend. He made it well. Right, that's true. Apollo chuckled. Friend. It was a really good word. It was also a relationship that Harkan had never had before. Even though he called his teammates, colleagues, the only person Harkan had ever called a friend was one person. Of course. Are you laughing? Unlike Apollo, Artemis couldn't laugh. It was because of the tall temple in front of her. Who are we going to meet now? That's what I'm saying. The largest temple in this tower. The most luxurious and greatest place, made for the whereabouts of only one person. This place was no different from the royal palace of Olympus. Because this temple belonged to their father, Zeus. Of all times, to be summoned like this. Apollo scratched his head, thinking of the text he had sent to Harkan. We won't be able to go help him like this. Zeus's summons were rare. Also, it was a more serious and important matter than any order that fell under the name of Olympus. It was impossible to ignore Zeus's summons. Coincidentally, right? Coincidentally, very much so. What do you think he's thinking? Well, how can we know the great mind of our father? Right, let's just go for now. We'll know once we go. Apollo said, looking at the rankers who were standing on the left and right at the entrance of the temple. Of all times, I wonder why he called us. Zeus wouldn't lay a hand on them right away. On the surface, nothing other than Heracles turning his back had been revealed about breaking Olympus. Clatter, clatter, Apollo and Artemis, the two of them stepped into Zeus's temple to meet him. The path going down from the 42nd floor to the 10th floor was long. Wu Wan, who had hurriedly come down to the 41st floor, borrowed the sun's chariot and moved with Harkan. You finally started, Harkan muttered in a serious voice and glanced at Wu Wan. The attack of the heavenly demon church. Both of them knew that it was a move that kept Wu Wan in mind. Don't worry about it, it wouldn't be strange if it happened once anyway. Did you contact them? I did, I told them to be careful. Wu Wan's voice was quite indifferent, unlike what was expected. Maybe he wasn't really worried. No, if that was the case, he wouldn't have moved in such a hurry. The heavenly demon church has the high ranker Cheon Mu Jin. There are also several upper rankers. You'll be fine. Words of comfort. However, it wasn't just words of comfort. In reality, the heavenly demon church, which had Cheon Mu Jin, was a force that was just as strong as its long history. It wouldn't collapse easily, if it's just one Athena. He felt an unusual sense of unease. With Poseidon imprisoned and Hades having turned his back, Wu Wan thought of the cards Zeus could play. Hermes, Dionysus, the Apollo siblings have sided with Hades asking for help from other guilds. No, there's no guild that would intervene in Olympus in a situation like this. While he was drawing a picture in his head for a moment. Pandora, what? It's Pandora, she was released. A name crossed his mind. Of course, it was a name Harkan didn't know. Who was Pandora? A high ranker who was sealed thousands of years ago. She was imprisoned in Olympus prison for her crimes, but was released during the second Gigantomachy, where she made great contributions and regained her former position. She was Zeus' hidden card. It was not strange that he had released her now, even though he had originally saved her for the second Gigantomachy. She is a very old high ranker who was sealed in Olympus prison. There are probably less than 10 people in Olympus who know her name. How do you know about someone like that? I just do. Of course. Is there anything you don't know? Hargan seemed to be past the point of doubting the information Wu Wan had, so he didn't say anything else. Now, he was just curious about where Wu Wan had been. But why was a high ranker who had been sealed for so long released now? Why do you think that is? Because there is no reason to keep her anymore. Why, the next Gigantomachy is over anyway. Even if it were possible, it would be delayed by thousands of years. The three gods were divided, and Heracles had turned away. Since Hephaestus could not be won over, it was impossible to supply weapons. Even if the next gigantomachy were to occur, Olympus would only be defeated. In that situation, it's not strange for Zeus to use Pandora, even if it's a little dangerous. Dangerous, father, an expression of incomprehension. It was a natural question. To be discussing the danger of Zeus, of all people. Yu-1 didn't answer Hargan's question any further. In truth, Yu-1 didn't know much about Pandora either. He had only heard a little about what she had done. I hope it's just a false alarm. There was no enemy within Olympus who could pose a significant threat at the moment, unless Zeus himself were to step forward. But if it was Pandora, that would be a different story. Let's hurry a little. Yu-1 pulled on the reins of the sun chariot. It seemed like he would have to speed up a little more. Cheok, cheok, tens of thousands of followers gathered in their seats. Every single one of them had their weapons and armor ready, and they were lined up in rows and columns, ready for battle. 1,000 years, 10,000 years. Cheonma, Cheonmujin, sat in his seat. 4 of the Cheonjas stood around him, exchanging words. It's been a long time since we've had a fight like this. Actually, isn't this the first time? That's right, it's a war with none other than Olympus. Expressions filled with worry, anticipation, and trepidation. Changcheonju and Quancheonju trembled with anticipation for the upcoming battle, while Dakanju and Jeomcheonju were more worried. No matter how powerful the Cheonma Divine Church was, their opponent was Olympus. They couldn't guarantee that they would survive a war with them. The information is certain, right? To Dakanju Jang Cheonal's question, Quancheonju, Pung Bakrim, replied. It is the word of the subjugation lord. It is certain. I knew something like this would happen someday. Jang Cheonal muttered in a disgruntled voice. Pung Bakrim's face crumpled at his words. Can I take that to mean that you are expressing dissatisfaction with the subjugation lord's actions? I thought that he would lead the Cheonma Divine Church into danger someday. And it seems like today is that day. Jang Cheonal did not deny Pung Bakrim's words. He had always expressed his concerns whenever news of Yu-1 was delivered. The subjugation lord who had become Olympus' enemy. If a war with Olympus were to break out because of him, the peace of the Cheonma Divine Church might be broken. He had always imagined this situation in his head. He who had no status on the heavenly mountain and was devoid of strength, just because he obtained the holy fire, he sat in the position of the small-scale leader. That was the beginning of this evil. How dare you? That's enough, both of you. Between the two, the sword saint, Shin Mugak, stepped in. The two who had been staring at each other and raising their momentum looked back at Shin Mugak. Of the 4 heavenly lords, he was the one with the most outstanding skills. Even if you only looked at the rankings, he was already close to being a high ranker, and he was being considered for the military position of the next Murim alliance. All 4 heavenly lords were equal, but Shin Mugak was an exception. Anger is not something you do to your comrades, but to your enemies. Recognize the situation right now. But, who do you dare raise your voice in front of? Shin Mugak shut down Pung Bakrim's protest with a single word. Cheonmujin sat with an expressionless face, looking at the devout followers of the heavenly demon religion lined up. He slowly raised his head and muttered, "You've come." The gazes of the 4 heavenly lords followed Cheonmujin's gaze. Cuckoo, coo. Under the bright moonlight, the cloudy sky opened up. Zap, the long-awaited guest had arrived. They came boisterously, those guys from that neighborhood. Unbefitting the situation, Cheonmujin's voice was calm and relaxed. Above the open sky, a ship descended. A ship that flew through the sky, stretching several kilometers. It looked like a small island. Is it Odysseus? There was only one Olympus ranker who led a ship of that size. The heavenly demon religion had been confined to the heavenly mountain for a long time, but it was not as if they were ignorant of the outside information. Odysseus was one of the main rankers leading Olympus's war along with Athena and Ares. They had heard rumors about the ship he led. Swoosh. Cheonmujin rose from his seat. Then, the 4 heavenly lords approached him in a hurry. There is no need for the lord to go out first. We will take the lead. If the heavenly demon, who is the leader and spiritual pillar of the heavenly demon religion, were to step forward first, the prestige of the heavenly demon religion would be extraordinary. The heavenly demon only rises from his seat when the heavenly demon religion is in danger. He, who had not been active externally for over 1,000 years, should not have shown up so quickly. But, is this a time to worry about such things? Quote. At such an obvious remark, the four heavenly lords had no choice but to shut their mouths. The opponent was Olympus, an opponent that they could never let their guard down against, or rather, an opponent that they had to fight with all their might. Screech. Towards that opponent, Cheon Mujin drew his sword first. Then, boo! A fiery mana erupted from Cheon Mujin's body. I should welcome you who have come this far. Heavenly Demon Order. A giant red giant figure appeared behind Cheon Mujin. It followed Cheon Mujin with a sword in hand, and stood next to the heavenly mountain with a body as large as a mountain. First form. Swoosh. Cheon Mujin's drawn sword points from the bottom to the top. Following that movement, Cheon Mujin's heavenly demon order exuded a majestic aura and the tip of the sword pointed exactly towards Olympus's ship that appeared above the sky. Basic strike. Swish, swish, the heavenly demon order's sword moved upwards. Zop. At the same time, the clouds split apart. The dim moonlight that had been hidden poured down below the ground. It looked as if the sky had been split in two with a single stroke. And at the same time, what? The ship. Creak, creak, creak. Zap. Olympus's ship, which was several kilometers long, was split in half. This much should be Cheon Mujin, an ancient high ranker who had not been active for thousands of years. And also, I hope this is not too shabby for a welcoming greeting. Alone, possessing half of the Murim world's forces, the moment had finally come for the hermitage of Cheonma to be broken. Chapter 169. Boom, rumble, bang, the ship that had lost its center crashed onto the ground. The wreckage of the ship poured down like rain, and the bodies of several players who had not been able to save themselves were crushed beneath it. Wow, what a grand welcome. A boy wearing an old hat pressed down on his head and flying lightly through the sky. Hermes, the high ranker of Olympus, stuck out his tongue as he watched the wreckage of the ship that had crashed to the ground. And next to Hermes, why didn't you dodge it? Athena narrowed her eyes and glared at him. The throne of freedom and thieves. Hermes, the great magician, could have moved the entire ship and avoided the swordsmanship. Of course, it's not that I didn't block it, it's that I couldn't block it, sister. From Hermes' point of view, Athena's words were simply unfair. Swish, a gaze moving next to Cheonmujin. A giant with a sword in one hand, made of a lump of red mana. I've never seen anything like that, even in Gigantomachia. A huge mana like a mountain. The magical power possessed by Cheonma was comparable to that of the Dragon Clan just by looking at its quantity. Cheonma was a monster that was much more than he had heard. I guess I should be prepared. Athena also felt the presence of the giant in front of her. We're fighting against Murim itself. Anyway, my father calls me for such a headache. I'll take care of Cheonma. Athena raised Aegis. Hermes, who looked at Athena with his eyes narrowed, made a strange expression. What's wrong? You didn't want to come. Once the fight starts, it's natural to do my best. I see. Don't be lazy and fight properly. Hermes, who scratched his head as if it was annoying and screamed, pulled his hat down even further. I hate fighting. Clang. A staff was held in Hermes' hand. A staff with a snake's head and decorated with several beads. Hermes swung the staff and lifted his body up. So let's finish it quickly and go back. I want to smell the blood as little as possible. Rumble, rumble, the trees planted on Cheonmasan shook, and soon they were pulled out by their roots. Clatter, clatter, the trees, which had been sharpened and turned into giant spears. What? Oh, it's coming. The believers gathered on Cheonmasan shouted as they watched it. Thousands of flying trees. The moment all the believers were on their guard against it. Flap, flap, screech. 4 Cheonjas jumped forward. Clang, clang, thud. Thousands of trees burst into pieces, scattering into tens of thousands of branches and falling powerlessly below. Hermes looked at the 4 rankers who looked like small dots in the distance and asked. Are those guys the 4 rankers that Cheonmasan Gyo is proud of? They are the ones who use the arrogant name of Cheonju, Heavenly Lord. It's a grand name for their skills, but they're pretty good. The 4 Cheonjas blocked his attack. He immediately recognized his opponent. I'll take care of those guys. What about the rest? They'll figure it out, sister. Hermes, who had already made up his mind, began to walk towards Cheonmasan alone. Individual action was absolutely forbidden in war, but this time was an exception. Hermes, the high ranker of Olympus, who symbolized freedom. He was the type of person whose abilities only came out when he was given freedom. A selfish guy. Of course, such a personality did not suit Athena. Everyone, stab. Athena raised Aegis and spread her mana-filled voice. Prepare for battle. Prepare for battle. Clank, clank. The Olympus-affiliated rankers and players who survived the crash armed themselves. Athena, who had been watching them finish their war preparations, gave the order. We will now begin the annihilation of the heavenly demon cult. Let's get started. Boom, boom, boom. An army of thousands began their charge towards the heavenly demon cult. For some reason, the heavenly demon fortress, which stood firm next to Mount Cheonma, did not move. I guess they're thinking the same thing. Cheon Mujin was not looking at the others. He had recognized the leader of this battlefield at a glance and had set Athena as his enemy. You are Athena, Cheon Mujin's voice. Even though he must have been standing on top of that high mountain, Athena felt as if Cheon Mujin was standing right in front of her. She could tell even without crossing swords. He was strong. Perhaps even stronger than herself. I guess it's true what they say, that not being active for a long time makes you rusty. As time passed, the rumors about the heavenly demon had diminished, and Athena had come to believe them to some extent. But what the hell, he's actually gotten a lot stronger. Cheon Mujin had not simply been holed up in the mountains, acting as a porter for all those years. On the contrary, his every day was a closed-door training session on Mount Cheonma, and he had not slacked off on his training for a single day during that time. The heavenly demon had become stronger than the rumors had led her to believe. Much stronger. Today might be the day the heavenly demon's ranking changes. Just as Athena was about to approach the heavenly demon fortress. What do I do? A desolate voice rang out. In the wreckage of the overturned ship. Two eyes with a chilling gaze stared at her, floating around like a will-o'-the-wisp. Those eyes are always so creepy. What on earth was she thinking, and what kind of emotions did she have? Her voice was certainly beautiful, like a flowing jade bead, but all she felt was a chilling coldness. Athena looked back at her and gave her a cold reply. Stay there. That's how you can help. Just stay here. Why? Because you're a disaster. You can't go outside. Pandora. The first time she learned about her was through her great-uncle, Poseidon. The strongest woman in Olympus. You've got a long way to go, kid. Hera. No, she's scary too, but in 100 years or so, you'll probably catch up to her. There's another woman who deserves the title of strongest woman. Athena had relentlessly questioned Poseidon about her. After several repeated questions, Poseidon finally satisfied Athena's curiosity. There used to be a ranker named Pandora. She's long forgotten, though. Pandora. Never heard of her. No, I hope you never do. What kind of person is she? Only Zeus knows about her. She showed up one day out of the blue, wielding a fearsome power. The strongest female warrior in Olympus. Athena, who had lived her life with that as her goal, had gone to the prison to meet Pandora in person. Unaware of what crime she had committed to be imprisoned there, or what abilities she possessed. Athena headed to the prison, knowing none of that. And the moment she met Pandora there, Athena vowed never to open the prison doors again. But, I never thought Father would release her himself. In the end, the disaster had been let out. Zeus must have judged that he could handle it, but to Athena, it felt like a heavy burden. Pandora, that box contained a power that should never be unleashed. So until I give you instructions, stay put. Then, are you really going to let me out? Yes. Athena nodded with difficulty. After all, it's a promise I made to Father. Father, Father. Pandora fell silent, her words trailing off. For a moment, Athena had the illusion that all the sounds of the world had disappeared. Zeus. The sound returned, and Pandora's voice echoed through her chest. Zeus, Zeus, Zeus. Anger towards Zeus. She shouted Zeus's name for a while as if she were having a seizure. Along with that, a strange energy wrapped around her and rose into the sky. Athena hurriedly pushed Aegis forward. Even as a high ranker, her energy was burdensome. I'm glad I moved the allies early. The reason she had moved in haste before the allies who had fallen from the ship could even regroup was because of Pandora. If Pandora attacked the allies first, it would be a disaster. Allies within who can't control their emotions are more dangerous than enemies. Pandora's energy was blocked by Aegis's protection, but Athena couldn't move for a while, standing there frozen. Just like that, in an instant. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Like a manic depressive, Pandora bowed her head and closed her eyes. Pandora's voice trailed off as she apologized repeatedly. It was my fault, so please let me out. Please. All right. Athena, her lips parted as if in anger, glared at Pandora for a moment before turning away. Until I call you, stay put there. Swish. Only then did Athena finally approach Chun Mujin. Her enemy that she had to face on this battlefield. She couldn't give up such an opponent to Pandora. She was both the strongest and worst enemy they had brought with them. I can't give it up. This war belongs to her. It had to be that way, and it had to be recorded that way. Screech, sword and shield. Athena, crossing the two, charged towards Cheonma Ridge. The sun carriage quickly passed through several floors. Moving along the fastest path, the sun carriage arrived at the center of the Murim world. Happy Huffei, where Namgong Sega was located. The road is really bumpy. It makes me nauseous. Harkin, who had spent the night in the swaying carriage, grumbled. It was more of a joke to relieve the tension for the upcoming fight than because it was really uncomfortable. There's not much left. Yeah, I can see it. Isn't that Happy over there? It's our first fight with Olympus. It's a fight that will start someday anyway. Might as well do it now. Fortunately, he didn't seem too nervous. Inside the rattling carriage, Harkin controlled his magic power, gradually finding his footing. He had nothing else to prepare besides his two fists and gauntlets. Now was the time to find the right tension and prepare for the fight. Watching Harkin, who closed his mouth after that brief conversation, Yuan turned his head and looked out the window of the carriage. The direction from Happy to Cheonmasan. Cheonmasan soon. Cheonmasan would probably be a battlefield by now. Olympus's rankers led by Athena. Maybe even Pandora would be there. Chun Mujin will somehow handle Athena. The problem is if Pandora is there. There was nothing he could do right now. For now, he had no choice but to picture the situation on Cheonmasan in his head. And so, as Yuan looked out the window of the carriage at the direction of Cheonmasan, the egg bares its teeth. The egg drools. The egg urges you to hurry. Yuan was surprised by the unexpected message and dropped his hand from the window frame. Huh, why is the egg reacting here all of a sudden? Judging by the fact that it was telling him to hurry, it seemed that the egg knew Yuan's destination. I already got the holy fire that was in Cheonmasan. There's no reason for the egg to react to the holy fire now. There was only one thing it could be hinting at. Pandora. Chapter 170, The Celestial Mountain Without the Divine Flames. Inside, there was no being other than Pandora that was worth considering. How did Pandora disappear? Information about her was a blank slate, and nothing was known about the circumstances of her birth. Right now, it's just speculation. The egg urges you. It doesn't really matter. This message was different from mere speculation. The fact that the egg reacted meant that traces of the outer were in the place he was headed. Since he had already checked the message, it didn't matter if the target was Pandora or Panda. Now there's really not much left. He felt confident. It was a bit faster than expected, but he was confident that the egg would hatch during this incident. Perhaps it would mark the end of the first half of his life after returning to the past. Are you hungry? The egg nods. Yes, you are. Wu Jin grinned. It's almost here. I'll fill you up soon. Soon, he would be able to meet the one inside. Thinking so, Wu Jin looked outside the sun carriage. And then, who are you talking to? Quote. Harkin's voice stabbed the back of Wu Jin's head. In his eyes, Wu Jin looked like he was talking to himself in the void. Zing, bam, one of the celestial mountain's peaks was sliced off by the impact of Chunma Ryong's sword and aegis. And it wasn't even from the sword being swung, but from the sword energy that had been reflected off his shield. Zeke, Athena, who had been knocked down to the ground, cushioned the shock by propping herself up with her hand. She hurriedly raised her head, and Chunma Ryong's sword was falling down. Scrack, quack. The ground was split apart by the sword. Athena's sword twisted the trajectory of the sword that Chunma Ryong swung. Athena quickly pushed off her feet and distanced herself from Chunma Ryong. He's fast. She thought that he would be slow because of his size. It was hard to imagine that he could use such a large-scale skill at such a fast speed. But Chunma Ryong was different. A giant form made of a mass of mana that moves according to the user's movements. Of course, its speed is no different from that of a heavenly horse. As soon as Chun Mu-jin's eyes caught Athena, Chunma Ryong's sword moved quickly again. Athena raised aegis to block it, slid it away, and narrowed the distance once more. Within that narrowed distance, you're not the only one who can attack. Boong. Athena's aegis extended forward and struck Chunma Ryong's abdomen. Clang. Goo. The impact shook the celestial mountain. Chunma Ryong's body shook, and at the same time, Chun Mu-jin's mana, which was maintaining Chunma Ryong, shook. And without missing that short opening, Athena threw the spear she had been holding in her other hand. Bam! The spear shot towards Chun Mu-jin. The spear shot towards Cheon Mu-jin. Only 3 people noticed Pandora's presence in that one step. It blew away one of Cheon San's peaks. But unfortunately, Cheon Mujin, like Athena, had raised his sword and let the spear's trajectory flow. Not just one, keying, thousands of spears appeared in the sky. In the narrow streets, for the first time since the battle began, Athena launched an offensive. Clang, clang, puck, pop, 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 puck. Giant holes began to appear in Cheon-san. Cheon Mujin, who had been avoiding attacks by stepping on the Dharma, glanced at his crumbling territory and muttered. Quote. It's not a very good sight. The land was becoming a mess. Cheon Mujin's Cheon Malryong, who had seen it, regained his composure. Cuckoo, the sword of Cheon Malryong, which had risen into the sky. Squeak, the sword moved again and began to join forces with Athena. Clang, clang, GGG, pong, spears and swords clashed and shattered. Athena, who had received Cheon Malryong's sword with her unbreakable aegis, charged towards Cheon Mujin. Hermes and Cheon Masangyo, warriors of Olympus, flew through the sky fighting 4 heavenly kings. Pandora sat still as Athena had ordered, her eyes fixed on the sight. Then, swoosh, thud, thud, someone's body flew from afar. The body, which appeared to belong to an Olympus player, did not seem to have been dead for long. That was the beginning. Pandora's view of the battlefield changed. Over here, wait, stop, stab, slash, burn, die. All kinds of emotions such as fear of death, murderous intent, and anger seemed to flicker like fireflies in Pandora's eyes. Swoosh, Pandora rose from her seat. Her body began to move on its own without her knowing. She reached out to the fireflies that seemed to be scattered before her eyes. It was a corpse, but to her eyes it seemed more beautiful than anything. This was it. A long time ago, a box that Zeus had handed her came to mind. This is a gift for you, Pandora. But you must not open this box. Never, no matter what happens. He gave her a box as a gift and told her not to open it. At first, she thought Zeus was making fun of her. But she accepted Zeus' gift and lived on, forgetting the box completely. Quite a long time passed. She remembered the box in order to survive from a rancor who had annihilated her family. Inside that, in the end, Pandora opened the box. And after that, those things came out. She was able to see the sparkling light. Thud, Pandora took a step towards the battlefield. Just one step on this vast battlefield. But there were 3 people who turned their heads at that one step. Pandora, oh, my, Athena and Hermes, and, quote. Who was that? Cheon Mujin, Cheon Mujin. Pandora looked at the figure and started walking again. As soon as Pandora arrived on the battlefield, all the troops were annihilated because of her ability. However, Yu-Won and Hargan appeared and stopped Pandora's movement, and Hargan escaped Pandora's influence. Yu-Won drew his sword and attacked Pandora, and Pandora's egg opened its mouth and began to hatch. Only 3 people noticed Pandora's presence in one step. As the fight between Athena and Cheon Mujin came to a standstill, for a moment there was an illusion that the battlefield had stopped. What did you bring? Cheon Mujin, who had released Cheon Malryong, looked up at Athena floating in the sky. Far away, under Cheon-san, one presence could be felt. Cheon Mujin felt that one presence was more dangerous than anything else on this battlefield. And, Pandora has moved. Athena looked at Pandora through the inner side of Aegis. Pandora, who began to walk slowly. It wasn't very fast, but it didn't seem to take long for her to reach the battlefield. Besides, at first glance, her pace seemed to be getting faster. If she arrives on the battlefield, the allied forces will be annihilated. Of course, the same goes for the heavenly demon cult. Probably the only ones who will survive are me, Hermes, and Cheon Mujin. And that's not a victory or a defeat. That was not the result Athena wanted. What should I do now? As Athena was agonizing over Pandora's existence, another familiar face appeared on the inner side of Aegis. You're here. Pandora's pace quickened. She moved from the wrecked ship and soon reached the entrance to the battlefield. Then, several players found her and approached her. Are you a player from Olympus? The players of Muramgai and Olympus were different from their outfits. They thought Pandora was a player from Olympus, and looked at her outfit, criticizing her for joining late. I haven't even armed myself yet. We'll punish you later. We're in the middle of a battle now. Hey, you, hurry up and get your gear. Or are you perhaps from the support team? Either way, you guys. Pandora's eyes swept over the players gathered around her. You're scary. So many. Despite hearing the same words, the expressions of the 5 players were all strangely different. Some avoided eye contact as if they had been pricked, while others blushed as if they were angry. Some bowed their heads as if they were ashamed. Scary, what nonsense. Creepy. A strange sensation ran down my spine. Only then did the expressions of the 5 players become the same. Their faces turned blue, their eyes widened as if they were about to burst, and their bodies began to tremble. Look at that, quack. Someone started strangling their own neck. It's scary. Jap, jap, jap. Players strangling their own necks. One of them stabbed his own heart with the sword he was holding. PFF'd, the player whose heart was pierced fell to the floor. 5 suicides that happened in an instant. Pandora watched that appearance and took another step. No, she tried to move. Where do you think you're going with those slow steps? A voice came from behind. Pandora's head turned. She could see the faces of 2 people. Stay here, it's no fun even if you go. Yuan and Hargan. The 2 got off the sun carriage and landed behind Pandora. It was real. Yuan looked at Pandora's face. It was a beautiful face. Pandora's appearance shone as much as one could see it a few times in a lifetime. But it wasn't just because of that. There was another reason why Yuan could be sure that she was Pandora the moment he saw her. The ability to maximize all negative emotions around you. It's just as I heard. These unpleasant feelings squirming in his chest. All the unpleasant feelings he could think of squirmed as if they were about to explode. It was the same as Pandora's ability that Yuan knew. She was maximizing all the negative emotions around her, centering on herself. And it was nothing more than an ability that Pandora exuded naturally, as if she was breathing. It's really annoying. What kind of guy is that? Hargan was also suffering within the range of that ability. Fortunately, unlike the players who had just committed suicide, Hargan did not immediately kill himself. Although the floor was not that high yet, Hargan had a strong mentality as much as any ranker. So when Hargan looked at Pandora with an unpleasant face. Zeus. Pandora also found Hargan behind Yuan. Zeus. A face that resembled Zeus more than anyone else. Pandora's body froze like a statue after discovering Hargan. Whether she intended it or not, Pandora's movement stopped. Yuan glanced at Hargan. Hargan, yeah, go to Chianma and help the bishop. Don't be too close here. Normally, he would have insisted at least once that he would fight together. But this time, I couldn't do that. Yeah, I guess I should. Hargan's gaze turned to the bodies of the players who had killed themselves with their own hands. I'm a little dangerous too. Pandora's influence was growing stronger at this very moment. It was safer to get away from her as soon as possible. Hargan staggered past Pandora and passed her by. Pandora's gaze followed him, but she soon turned her head and looked at Yuan again. Still, the instinct remains. Before I knew it, Yuan had drawn his sword. Perhaps if Pandora's head hadn't turned just now, she might have tried to cut her throat with a single blow. The table is roughly set. Under Yuan's feet, Puck. The egg opens its mouth. The egg, whose hatching was just around the corner, began to show its first teeth. Let's start eating. Chapter 171. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Crackle. The egg bared its teeth. It was the first time this had happened. This lazy thing that knew nothing but eating was showing its face first. Does that mean it's that urgent? In any case, it wasn't bad from Yuan's perspective. The fight would be a lot easier if he had the egg's help. Furthermore, if it participated in the fight, something might happen. Swish. The teeth disappeared again, the mouth closed, and the egg became so quiet that Yuan couldn't even hear it breathing. Well, of course, he didn't think an unhatched egg would come out and help him. It was useless to have high expectations. Let's see what comes out. As Yuan was feeling disappointed and determined at the same time. For the first time, Pandora looked at Yuan and opened her mouth. Are you feeling anxious? He felt bad for no reason. It was so bad that he felt like he had never felt this bad before. He had the illusion that his voice was echoing in his head. You know you can't win anyway, right? It's a waste of effort. You're going to die anyway. Why don't you give up? Why do I have to go through this? Negative thoughts that he had been holding in his heart. It was just a speck of dust compared to Yuan's entirety, but emotions didn't have a fixed size. There was only one way to suppress the emotions that were rapidly growing in size: strong willpower. Why are you blocking me? Pandora asked. Yuan poured magic into Quinn in his hand and answered. Because your existence is harmful to us. Us. She looked completely clueless. From that reaction, Yuan realized that Pandora was different from a simple outer. Is she also one of the seeds? Foolish chaos. The outers that had existed in the tower since time immemorial. Pandora was the same as Lancelot. The only difference was that the Pandora in front of him had a much larger fragment of the outer's power hidden in her than the outer that had been planted in Lancelot's body. The fight has already started. Yuan looked at Pandora's gradually distorting expression. He had fought countless battles with the outers. That was why he knew exactly how dangerous the aura he felt from her was. First, something light, crackle, crackle, black lightning appeared in his hand. Piece of lightning, reacts to, Quinn. Lightning shot out of Yuan's hand. Boom, crackle, crackle, lightning surged up where Pandora was. One bolt of lightning devoured the aura that had been wrapped around Pandora, turning the surroundings into a mess. Is this enough of a greeting? Swish, swish, the lightning that had surged up suddenly disappeared. Yuan sighed as he looked at Pandora, who had appeared from within the blackened lightning. Not even close. Pandora's ability grew stronger by feeding on emotions. Negative emotions, to be exact, were her power source. And this was a battlefield. A place where negative emotions couldn't help but run high. Everyone had a fear of death, and all of that became Pandora's power. Slice, crackle, crackle, magic surged out of Quinn. He swung the unsheathed sword towards Pandora's neck in one swift motion. Screech, it was deflected by an invisible force. He tried to force his way through, but the unpleasant feeling churning inside him made his grip weaken for a moment. Swish, Pandora's hand shot out. Grab. The grip on the back of his neck strangled him. His body floated up into the air against gravity, then was thrown away. Bang, clang, bam, her back was shocked as she was slammed deep into the ground. For a moment, she felt dizzy. Wow, there was only one thing she felt during her fight with Pandora, but only for a short while. Seriously, thinking about Pandora's performance in the Second Period Great War, it might have been a natural feat. She had come prepared for it, but she couldn't help but sigh when she realized the difference in their strengths. Her body was embedded in the ground. Outside, she could feel Pandora walking towards her. This situation wasn't unfamiliar. I've been through something like this when I fought against Crisis. It was before she obtained the Black Soulstone. But even back then, the fight ended in a draw. She had to think. A way to win against Pandora. Help me out a little, you two. Opening square bracket single quote question mark single quote. S-egg, shakes its head. Damn it, Yu-1 cursed inwardly at the resolute answer. She was a good for nothing. She didn't need to be persuaded. She was a willful person, so she wouldn't listen. She had to choose another way. Thud, Pandora's footsteps drew nearer. With it, the unpleasant feelings boiling inside her chest began to stir more violently. I guess I can see why you killed yourself. She wanted to beat it all up and stab her throat with a sword. This feeling couldn't simply be dismissed as annoyance. There was a reason for the term, condition. In her prime, Pandora was ranked higher than Athena. It wouldn't be any different now, so there's no answer in a head-on fight. Yu-1 got up from her seat. There was little time to think. The distance to Pandora had become closer. Magic power, is activated. Lightning shard, reacts with, Quiney. Fire eyes, is activated. Sensory zone, is activated. This fight had lower odds of winning than any other fight Yu-1 had fought since her regression, but it was a fight she had to win more than any other. An unintended fight. That's why it was a fight with a more valuable victory. Should I take that guy out? I'd like to keep it hidden until the fight with the three-eyed if possible. A battlefield with many watchful eyes. Yu-1, who had to see further, couldn't use all the cards she had now. Of course, if it was really difficult, she couldn't just hide it, but she had to win with as few cards as possible if possible. I need to find another breakthrough. That's when she tried to think and act at the same time. Why are you trying to kill me? Pandora's trembling voice could be heard from above the ground. Why? What did I do wrong? Why? A resentful and indignant voice. It was strange how many emotions could be contained in one person's voice. Anger, resentment, loneliness, fear. Pandora was a huge mass of all negative emotions. Wait a minute, that was when it happened. A fact she had forgotten flashed through her mind. Skywalk, is activated. Movement speed increases by 100% for 5 seconds. You can walk on the sky for 5 seconds. She stepped on the void a few times, and Yu-1 quickly ascended to the sky. Pandora's gaze rose, and their eyes met. Her pupils were a complex mixture of thoughts. There it is. The moment she saw those eyes, Yu-1 was convinced. A breakthrough. The duration of Skywalk, a skill attached to Hermes's gate, was about 3 seconds. That was enough time to check. Pop, she lightly stepped on the void. Pandora turned her head to find Yu-1. It was then that a purple flame entered Pandora's field of vision, who rolled her eyes to find Yuan, who had disappeared in an instant. Roar! Huh! Her eyes widened. What she saw wasn't just a simple flame. Kya! Clank! The tip of the sword cut into Pandora's neck. A sharp sensation ran through Yuan's fingertips, as if he were striking metal. Blood. The cut was small, and the wound was shallow. She's tough. It wasn't just her ability to control emotions, her physical abilities were already comparable to those of a high ranker. Just how high are her stats? Stamina was the foundation of physical ability. Judging by the fact that she wasn't using any special skills, this toughness must have come solely from her stats. The current Pandora had a body strong enough that even Yuan couldn't easily pierce it with his sword. But still, the impact of the sword was almost non-existent. But the burns appearing on Pandora's skin were clearly caused by the holy fire. It's doing damage. There was no impact from the sword, but there was damage from the fire. It was an obvious result. This is the nature of the holy fire. The holy fire was a monster that fed on the emotions of its opponents. And in that sense, the holy fire was the worst matchup for Pandora. Holy fire proficiency has increased by 0.21%. Holy fire proficiency has increased by 0.38%. Holy fire proficiency has. The proficiency was rising rapidly. The holy fire's proficiency didn't increase much, as the skill's rank was high. Even if it did increase, it was only by about 0.01%, which was too small to be significant. He had raised the proficiency by about 5%. But at this moment, the holy fire's proficiency was increasing at an exponential rate. And as a result, whoosh, flutter, it was only natural that the flames of the holy fire would intensify. Just as a small ember could spread to an entire forest, consuming dry branches as fuel, the holy fire that Yuan exhaled fiercely wrapped around the two of them. Ah! Og! Pandora's eyes shook violently, a battlefield overflowing with all sorts of negative emotions. Amidst it, a giant flame that swallowed the countless fireflies reflected in her eyes. Disappear! Disappear! Boom! Crash! Pandora waved her hands blindly at the flames that were gradually closing in on her. But it was nothing more than a desperate struggle born of fear. Sizzle! Whoosh! Roar! Once the fire had taken hold, it was not easily extinguished. No, the holy fire was an eternal fire that would never go out until Yuan's strength was exhausted. The heat was hot enough to burn Pandora's body. Og! Pandora screamed in agony from the fire clinging to her body. Negative emotions were the source of Pandora's power. The stronger those emotions, the stronger she became, and the greater the influence she could exert on her surroundings. But that was the problem. The holy fire was a flame that fed on those emotions. Unbeknownst to her, she had become a huge piece of firewood. A skill that didn't work well against Ares is being used like this. A skill that was useful in fights against a relatively weak majority was being used against the strongest and most difficult individual. No, now that the proficiency had increased, it would probably be much more powerful than before, even against someone other than Pandora. Is it almost over? Pandora was burning brightly in the flames. It was the moment her knees buckled. The egg of is drooling. A message from the one who had been waiting for the prey to weaken. I'll have to feed you a lot. It felt like raising a lazy child. This time, I've really got everything ready. Crunch. A mouth much larger than before opened in the ground beneath Pandora. 100 mouths and hundreds of teeth. Yuan nodded at the creature's increased size. Devour her. Chomp. Chapter 172. It was strange. By now, the fight over there should have been over. The gap between Pandora and Kim Yuan was that great. A fight that would have ended in 1 or 2 minutes at most, he couldn't understand why it wasn't over yet. Is it because of Pandora's instability? At first, he thought that was it. Kim Yuan, who appeared before Pandora. The reason he was still alive was simply because his mental strength was higher than most rankers. Indeed, a guy like that could have brought Olympus to this state. But, rumble, a fire soared from a place a little far from Mt. Chianma. The flames quickly grew large enough to engulf the entire mountain. But the important thing wasn't the fire. Kyak. A woman's scream, buried in the noise of the battlefield. Athena hurriedly checked the situation through the inside of Aegis at Pandora's scream. Pandora, engulfed in purple flames. How? You showed me an opening. Athena, shocked, raised her head. At that moment. Swish, bang, Athena's body, struck by Qianmalriang's sword, flew down. Boom, crash, boom, boom, boom. Athena, who had collapsed several peaks of Mt. Chianma, barely got up on the ground. A deep wound was left on her shoulder, which she had failed to defend with aegis. To think a momentary opening would lead to this. It seemed he had been too complacent against Chianma. But it wasn't a situation he could let slide. A distance had opened up. Athena looked at Pandora's situation again. Then, what? Athena's eyes widened. She had clearly seen Pandora burning in purple flames just a moment ago. What is this? Instead of Pandora, something pitch black was reflected in aegis. The ground covered in thousands of teeth. Crunch. The egg began to feed, putting Pandora inside and chewing. It's eating for a long time. He knew from Lancelot's case that size didn't matter. Perhaps the egg wasn't eating Pandora's flesh or bones, but the outer's power within her. Is that why there's so much of it? Unlike Lancelot, who was barely at the start of being a high ranker, she had the strength to rival high rankers of fairly high rankings. And the reason she was able to have such power was mostly thanks to the power outside the tower. And the egg was thoroughly, very thoroughly, digesting that power. What is all this? Thud. Yu-1 raised his head at the calm voice. In the sky, floating quite high up, a young boy was looking down at Yu-1. Am I really seeing this? Hermes, Olympus, high ranker who symbolized freedom. His ranking was higher than Ares, but if you looked at only his abilities, he was far inferior to Athena. Hermes was a ranker whose only advantage was his mobility, so his destructive power wasn't that great. Are you asking me that? Who else would I ask? You're quite the joker. We're not even on the same side. We're kind of on the same side. Hermes came down and landed on the ground. Yu-1, who had been on guard for a moment, lowered his sword again. Hermes didn't raise his staff or use any magic. Are you not going to fight? I've fought enough just now. You know about my sister, I don't really like fighting. You must have orders, though. There's no reason to fight anymore, is there? Crunch, crunch, Pandora being chewed on by countless teeth. Hermes looked at Wu-Yun with curiosity. You seem to have my shoes. Can you answer me a question? Hermes' gaze turned to the shoes Wu-Yun was wearing. It was an item he had lost a long time ago. It was an item he had treasured as much as his staff, and Wu-Yun was wearing it. Perhaps it had somehow reached the administrator and had been given to him as a reward. I won't ask you again. As you can see, Wu-Yun answered, watching the same scene as Hermes. I don't know either. What kind of answer is that? You'll find out soon enough. Hermes frowned as if he understood and didn't. He looked as if he was asking what Wu-Yun meant. He also thought that Wu-Yun might be evading the answer. But Wu-Yun was being sincere. He didn't know the true identity of the egg either. He only knew that it was a type of outer, based on the patterns engraved on it. The creature had grown by eating the outer. Perhaps. Just perhaps, this guy could be the outer's natural enemy. The probability was low. The outer that Wu-Yun had seen and experienced were beings that didn't deserve the word, natural enemy. There were many beings that were incomparable to Pandora, such as one of the heads of Yamata no Orochi, Lancelot, or even the one right before their eyes. Is there a natural enemy that could devour them? It was hard to believe. But he had no choice but to try. He had been given another chance. He had to win this time, no matter what. Are you just saying that because you don't want to talk right now? Hermes asked, dissatisfied with the answer. Wu-Yun shook his head and pointed ahead. Look at that, swish, the place where Pandora had been. Dozens of tentacles emerged from between thousands of teeth. It was the first time he had ever seen such a life form. At that moment, dozens of teeth approached as if they didn't want to miss it and devoured it. Wu-Yun continued, looking at Hermes' face, which had turned pale. Do you think I would know about that? It was a strangely convincing statement. It was something he couldn't believe even after seeing it. If he had to talk about something scary, Zeus was much scarier. Even if he brought dozens of those things, they wouldn't be able to defeat Zeus. However, the fear Hermes was feeling was different. If he had to find a reason, it was because he couldn't understand it. Yes, I guess so. As Hermes nodded, Holy Lord. Step back. Poonbeknum and Baekmakong ran up and blocked Wu-Yun's path. Clang, thud. Immediately after, Shinmujuk and Jangqianal blocked Hermes' path. Poonbinim's body was already torn and tattered, and Shinmuguk's arm seemed to be broken as it dangled powerlessly. It seemed that the four of them were trying their best to hold Hermes back with all their might. Whoa, you guys are fast. Hermes, on the other hand, was relaxed. He didn't have a single scratch on him. However, Hermes raised his staff and said, Surrender, surrender, quote. Question marks appeared above the four people's heads. It was a fight that had been one-sided until just a moment ago, but now he was suddenly talking about surrender. I don't think I can fight with this guy too. And this fight is already over. Hermes, head turned, and at that moment, swish. Bang, something fell from the sky and kicked up a cloud of dust. Poonbeknam and Shinmujuk rushed to protect Wu Yun from it, and Baekmakong swung his spear to clear the dust. Ah! Athena rose from the dust. She was bleeding, holding Aegis in one hand and a broken sword in the other. It seems everyone's here, coincidence or fate. As the end of the battle approached, everyone gathered in one place. Hermes, sister, Hermes, gaze turned to the spot where Pandora had disappeared. We've lost, ... It was something he already knew. And that's why it was even more bitter. For whatever reason, he had lost to Cheon Mujin because he had taken his eyes off the ball for a moment. Pandora had been defeated by Kim Yuan, and Hermes was the only one who was relatively unscathed. But even with him there was no way to turn the tide of the battle. That guy again, PPUT. Athena glared at Yuan and gritted her teeth. War and wisdom, these were the two words that symbolized her within Olympus. In fact, she had been on countless battlefields hosted by Olympus and had lived without knowing defeat. That's why she always stood at the forefront of the war. There was one battle that she had failed a while ago. And again today, she had suffered a defeat at the hands of Yuan. Heracles did your bidding as well. She had guessed, but she wanted to hear the answer for sure. And she was curious, what on earth had Heracles, once known as the hero of Olympus, turned his back on? What on earth had Kim Yuan done to attract him? However, no, the answer that came back was completely different from Athena's expectations. It's your fault. What? I just told him what Zeus, your father, did. That's all. What on earth was she talking about? It was something she couldn't understand at all. It felt like a thick fog suddenly descended on something that had been shrouded in a veil. Yuan looked at Athena, who was bewildered. Weruk. Wan finds out the truth. One of Wan's abilities. Falsehood and truth. In this case, it wasn't just a matter of gauging the other person's mood through their expressions and eyes, but it was still much more accurate to use the skill than to simply read their expressions. Athena didn't know. As she was Ares' sister, she thought she would have been involved in Heracles' work as well. But it seemed that she didn't know anything about Heracles. Athena, who stood at the forefront of Olympus and led the war, but it seemed that Zeus didn't trust her completely. Then Hermes. Yuan turned his head and looked at Hermes. His expression was simpler to read than Athena's. Not interested, it was a reaction like Hermes. His symbol within Olympus was freedom. Hermes, known for his simple nature, who hated complicated things, didn't care much about anything that didn't directly concern him. They say he wouldn't care even if Olympus collapsed. Neither of them had anything to do with Heracles. So, when Athena learns the whole truth, will she be able to stand on the opposite side of Zeus? It was a concern. Athena's abilities are helpful. She was a force to be reckoned with. Athena's commanding ability, honed through countless wars, shone in larger-scale battles. In fact, it was Athena, not the three gods or Heracles, who had commanded the Gigantomachy twice. Let's catch them for now. The outcome of the battle was decided. Yuan pondered for a moment over how to treat the two. And then, the hatching rate of the egg is increasing. The hatching rate of the egg, which had finished digesting, began to rise again. Hatching rate, 96.01%. Hatching rate, 96.67%. Hatching rate, 97.17%. Hatching. The hatching rate went up without stopping. Yuan watched the rising hatching rate with a sense of impatience. Please. Hatching rate, 99.23%. Hatching rate, 99.40%. Hatching. Finally. Hatching rate, 100%. The egg begins to hatch. Check. The thousands of teeth that had been in front of him disappeared, and cracks began to form on the surface of the egg in his inventory. Chapter 173. Leveling with the Gods. Chapter 173 *. 3 gazes lingered on the pond. In the midst of a silence that had grown old, a small voice rang out. We lost. It was Apollo who broke the long silence. On the pond, Athena could be seen dropping Aegis to the ground, while Chun Yu-jin pointed his sword at her neck. The battle was over. It was an outcome that no one had expected. Will you speak now? Why have you called us here? ... Zeus said nothing. It was the most fearsome silence of all. Zeus, whose expression never changed, always struck fear into the hearts of those closest to him. Father, Artemis called out. At that moment, Zeus's head turned. It seems I will have to watch for another 3,000 years. Excuse me. His answer had nothing to do with the question. Apollo tensed up. He prepared to leave at any moment and asked again. What do you mean by 3,000 years? To bear and raise more children, and for them to become rankers. Zeus trailed off, as if regretting something. It is the time it will take for Olympus's waning power to recover. Apollo's skin crawled at those words. It was also the answer to his first question. Do you intend to cut us down as well? Do you not know that well enough? Because we are no longer needed. Yes, unlike the other Olympians, Apollo and Artemis had not participated in the gigantomachy. It was after that the Apollo siblings fell out of Zeus's favor. Why now of all times? Apollo's gaze turned to the pond, which had been reflecting the battlefield until just a moment ago. Was it to keep us here? Did he know that they had been in contact with Harken? Before the full-scale destruction of Olympus, the two of them had been considering joining the battle. But it seemed that Zeus had known about it all along. How unfortunate. Zeus rose from his seat. Crackle. A massive bolt of lightning erupted around Apollo and Artemis. Zeus's magic crackled noisily, as if he were furious. We have to escape. He made up his mind. Apollo's eyes flicked upwards. He had brought the sun chariot with him, though he hadn't intended to use it for this. If only I can get to the chariot. Even Zeus wouldn't be able to follow him easily. But, flash, in the sky above, dark clouds swirled. A brilliant burst of light erupted from within them. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. It's a shame to see you go so soon. Boom, rumble, the wreckage of something pitch black fell from the shattered sky. The moment he saw it, Apollo's eyes widened as if they were about to burst. He recognized what the wreckage was immediately. The sun chariot. The finest mode of transportation in the tower, which Hephaestus had spent years creating. It had been reduced to ashes by Zeus's power. I will ask you one more time. Step. Zeus approached the Apollo siblings. Whose side are you on? Athena and Hermes were imprisoned in the deepest dungeon of Miriam. Their magic was suppressed, and their bodies were bound with ropes that even high rankers could not break. The heavenly mountain had collapsed. They had won the battle, but the heavenly demon cult had lost their base. We'll have to move our headquarters completely. Where to? How about Hapcheon, where Namgung Sega is? Many in Miriam still fear the heavenly demon cult. It's too early to move our headquarters. There are still many in the Miriam who fear the Cheon Mashinkyo. It's too early to move our base. Harken left the barracks as if he were running away. But we can't stay here forever. It's time to ask the Miriam for cooperation. I agree. Since things have come to this, we should. The Cheon Mashinkyo members gathered in a town near Cheon-san or in a makeshift barracks to hold a meeting. There were two main topics. The treatment of the captured Olympus rankers, including Athena and Hermes, and the relocation of the Cheon Mashinkyo headquarters. Both were important matters, so the meeting continued all day long. And at that moment, Yu-won was lying in the barracks he had obtained from the Cheon Mashinkyo, sighing. It's taking a long time. Creak. Another crack. The egg looked like it would shatter into pieces if it was tapped. Of course, if he had wanted to hatch it that way, he would have broken or eaten the egg long ago. Hatching. An annoying message. Yu-won took out the egg, not knowing when it would hatch, and watched it quietly. Thanks to the full hatching rate, the purple pattern was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the surface of the egg was filled with purple, leaving no other parts visible. Amazing. Won perceives the interior. Yu-won used Won again to look inside the cracked egg. However, I can't see anything. Still, nothing could be seen from the egg. Even with Won, the egg still appeared as just a purple sphere. This side is also this side, but... Yu-won turned his head and looked at the woman sitting on the opposite bunk. This side is also embarrassing. Pandora, she was staring at the egg with blank eyes, just like Yu-won. Unlike when they first met, her expression showed no sign of emotion. All that was consumed was the power of the outer. There wasn't even a small scratch on her body. It was strange. It seemed that she was being eaten by the egg, but Pandora on the outside looked fine. The egg had really only eaten the outer that had been attached to Pandora. A doll with no emotions, empty inside. That was the state of Pandora that Yu-won had concluded. Having had all of her immense emotions eaten away, she had a truly empty expression. What are you doing? Just then, Harken, who had walked through the cloth and into the barracks, asked Yu-won. Yu-won pointed at the egg. Why, are you going to eat it? No, I think it's going to wake up soon. Oh, is that a divine beast? That thing? Harken's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he stepped inside. But then, I'm surprised, Harken exclaimed in surprise when he saw Pandora in Yu-won's barracks. Just a day ago, she had been an enemy. Moreover, Harkin was afraid to see Pandora, as he felt as if he wanted to kill himself just by being near her. What? Why are you here? I told her to go, but she wouldn't. She doesn't even speak. Then why don't you just kick her out? I'd like to do that too. Yu-won shrugged and asked Harkin. But can you do that? No, Pandora stayed by Yu-won's side without moving an inch. It was useless to grab her hand and pull her, and she had no intention of leaving on her own. It was impossible to drag her out by force. The holy fire no longer worked, and she was more than Athena if you just looked at her strength. Unless Hades comes in person, I don't think there's anyone on our side who can drag Pandora out. For that reason, Pandora stayed by Yu-won's side. In fact, there was no need to kick her out. She really didn't do anything by Yu-won's side. I don't think I can stay here. I'm going. Why? Unlike you, I'm a coward. I still feel a little sick. Harkin ran out of the barracks as if he were running away. Anyway, I was going to kick him out if he came in, so it was a good thing. Check. The cracks spread again. It seemed like it was really time now. Srrrung. A human figure rose through Yuan's shadow. An undead with Lancelot's face. Arthur. Arthur knelt before Yuan. Speak. Guard the entrance to the barracks. Don't let anyone in. Anything could happen from now on. The power of the outer that he had eaten up until now was not something this small barracks could handle. Someone might come in and get caught up in it, or a really dangerous monster might pop out. That's why Yuan called Arthur to guard the barracks. But, yes, I understand. Suk, one step ahead of Arthur, someone who had heard Yuan's words stood in front of the barracks. Pandora, who had been sitting across from Yuan just a moment ago. She was standing in front of the entrance to the barracks, her back to Yuan. What are you doing? I told you to block it. I wasn't talking to you. I heard you. She was stubborn. When he told her to go, she didn't listen, but when it came to this, she listened too well. Ah, okay. Yuan knew from his experience just now that it was no use talking to her. Besides, there was no need to refuse. If Pandora was guarding it, neither Cheonma nor Athena would be able to get in. I don't know what happened, but the change in Pandora. What it was, he would find out later. This comes first. Check. JJEOJEOJEOK. Cracks spread across the purple surface of the egg. Between the spreading cracks, a purple light leaked out, and a familiar energy was felt. As expected, Orochi's head, Lancelot, Pandora. They were the ones who ate the remnants of the outer and increased their hatching rate. Naturally, he thought that their identities would also be related to the outer, and with this, that guess turned into a certainty. Now there was only one problem. The outer god. Among those called the outer gods, which one was in here? JJA, Jijiajoyak. The cracks spread faster and faster. The time it took for them to spread over the entire egg and break the surface was a mere moment compared to the long time he had been waiting. Kong, Wa'ak. A swarm of light erupted from the egg. Yuan looked at it without dodging. And that moment. Opening square bracket single quote question mark. Egg, hatches. Starting contract with. What? He understood the hatching, but what was this contract? This was something he hadn't expected. The swarm of light did not disappear easily. The energy that was pouring out became stronger and stronger, making it difficult to stand nearby. Before he knew it, Pandora had turned around and was looking at him. Churut, Chutut. The swarm of light and energy that had erupted from the broken egg wrapped around Yuan and began to enter his body. The incomprehensible power that existed outside the tower. The moment he accepted that power, Yuan realized. Is this the contract? This power originally belonged to the egg. Sharing that power, or rather, sharing it together, was the process of the contract. Shwa. The power pouring out of the egg gradually decreased over time. The light also gradually weakened, revealing the figure inside. And then, opening square bracket single quote question mark single quote. Succeeds in hatching, opening square bracket single quote question mark single quote. Has a growth rate of 0%. Please name, opening square bracket single quote question mark single quote. Is level 1. Level. An absurd message appeared in front of Yuan. Chapter 174. Level. There were only a few cases where a level was attached to a being that wasn't a player, at least as far as Yuan knew. Undead Chimera. An undead that leveled up. Because of that being, the ranking of the undead Chimera later rose much higher than before. After becoming a ranker, he quickly became a high ranker, but then he was completely wiped out by the heavenly demon Great Saint, and his existence disappeared from the tower. Like that, there were some cases where beings other than players leveled up. However, I've never heard of a divine beast leveling up. It was a message that was beyond common sense. Yuan looked at the slowly fading light and confirmed the body of the egg that had been dormant inside it. Inside it, Thump, kid, a baby the size of a palm, with large, blinking eyes, sat there quietly looking at Yuan. Black hair and eyes, a small and round figure like a fairy. Abba, did that mean father? Abba BBA, BBA BBA. Judging by the words that followed, it didn't seem to be the case. It was just a child who hadn't learned to speak yet, just making random noises with his mouth. I really didn't expect this. It was difficult and complicated. He had been expecting something like a small tentacle monster to come out since he could feel the outer's energy. But instead, it was a small child like this. I feel like I've become a nanny. He didn't like it very much. Depending on the player's disposition, divine beasts that hatched from eggs usually played a role in leading the front lines of the battlefield according to their master's will. Yuan had also intended to use the one that hatched from the egg in that way. However, no matter what, he couldn't bring himself to throw such a small child at the enemy. Furthermore, at this rate, we won't be able to talk. Abba BBA. Yuan was startled by the voice that came from right next to his ear and turned his head. The child was now on his shoulder. He tilted his head, not knowing what the child was saying, but it seemed that proper communication would be difficult for the time being. When did he get here? He knew that the child wasn't just a small child the size of a palm. But he didn't know that he could move without being detected. Abba, BBA BBA. Please name. A message appeared along with the child's cry. A name. He wasn't very good at naming things, but it seemed that this message would continue to appear if he didn't name it. What should I do? He thought for a moment. And soon, a familiar character overlapped the child's face. He looks just like the character in the Maple story. A long time ago, Yuan used to enjoy playing a game on Earth. He decided on a name for the child, who looked just like the character in that game, with a 1:1 ratio of head to body. Maple. Would you like to name it, Maple? No. Yuan shook his head. The child tilted his head. If it had a name, it should also have a surname. Kim Maple. That's your name. At those words, Pandora, who was standing next to him, turned her head and stared at Yuan. She still had an expressionless face. No, maybe her eyes were slightly furrowed. Yuan, who met her gaze, asked, "Why, the name is strange." Then Pandora's gaze turned to the little child named Kim Maple. And that thing is scary. The outer's energy that had been inside her had disappeared, and along with it, all of her emotions had disappeared, but she was still afraid. This little guy, could Pandora see something that he couldn't? Probably not. No matter how high Pandora's ranking was and how great her abilities were, she didn't have the same skill as Yuan's heavenly sight. There was only one way to explain this. Is it like an instinct? A power that had been in her body for a long time. This little child had eaten that power and grown up until now, and hatched from an egg and came out into the world. Since it was a power that had troubled her until now, Pandora's instincts were rejecting it. That's when Yuan was looking at Pandora. Opening square bracket single quote question mark single quote. Has been given a name. Opening square bracket single quote question mark single quote. Likes the name. The contract is complete. Some of the abilities of Kim Dan Peng will be shared from now on. Invalid stat. Some of the stats will be replaced with mana. Mana has increased by 3. Messages that suddenly popped up. Following that, swoosh. It felt like her body was floating, overcoming gravity, and Yuan's vision turned upside down. The scenery inside the barracks, and Pandora standing next to her. Everything disappeared and she was left alone in an empty world. No, Abba. Dan Peng, who was on her shoulder, was still there. Are you this, Abba? It still sounds like, Dad. Anyway, it seemed like she meant yes after looking at her roughly. Yuan turned her head and looked ahead. In the empty space where there was nothing and gravity couldn't even be felt, something was appearing. Teeth. Snap. It was a familiar guy. The mouth that appeared every time the egg ate an outer. The guy opened his big mouth and approached Yuan. She felt suffocated. It was the first time this guy's teeth had turned towards her. When she first ate Orochi's body, it felt strange and bizarre, and she felt sick, but she didn't feel the same pressure as now. What the hell is this? An outer? If so, it was definitely at the top level. Are you after me this time? The mouth came closer and closer. Nothing could be seen inside the wide open mouth. She was being eaten. She felt it clearly, but Yuan was strangely not scared. It's not dangerous. This was something created by Danpeng on her shoulder. No, maybe it was the guy himself. It's not dangerous. Yuan entered the guy's mouth with that conviction. At that moment, gulp, you have acquired the skill, Predator. The message popped up and the guy went into Yuan's stomach. Puke, her vision returned. The state that was like zero gravity disappeared, and the scenery inside the barracks came into view again. Yuan hurriedly blinked her eyes and recalled the message from earlier. Predator, 3 stats due to the hatching of the egg. All of them were mana stats, and they were quite high. She felt a sense of fulfillment all over her body, completely different from just a moment ago. This was quite an achievement, but she even got an additional skill. Yuan hurriedly checked the skill. Predator, hash rank. Hash proficiency, 0.98%. Hash an unknown being whose name is not even clear. Summons a monster that eats them. Hash additional stat increase depending on the size of the target. It was a skill that matched its name perfectly. The unknown being probably meant, outer. This power had changed into the form of a skill and fell asleep inside Yuan. They said they shared some of their abilities. Did that include skills? The mouth she had seen earlier. That was the Predator, and the guy had definitely entered her stomach. Predator, a skill that eats outer and absorbs their power. Can I eat those guys and get stronger? In an instant, Yuan recalled the outer gods horde that had unfolded before her. At that time, they felt like fierce waves, like a huge disaster. But thinking about that time with this skill, she felt really ironic. It's almost dinner time, eat those guys and get stronger. Imagining that, I got goosebumps. Crazy, this was on a completely different level than a mere powerful skill. It was an ability that would completely change the things I had planned. I was going to continue to face outers inside and outside this tower in the future. What are the chances? About 6 months ago, that was the question that Sun Ogong's 12th clone had asked. Well, it's probably about 1 in 10 right now. Is that all? The fact that there's a chance at all is important. Like I said earlier, right now, it's just like I've barely plugged a broken hole. I plugged a broken hole. At the time, that was a very appropriate thing to say. Until then, all I had done was prevent Hephaestus from joining Olympus and reveal the relationship between Lancelot and Olympus, which was the beginning of Ragnarok. I thought that the probability would not change even now that I had drawn Hercules in. But, 10%, this power would change the story. The probability had increased dramatically. There was hope for a fight that I had thought was almost impossible. The egg I had thrown at the rock had now turned into a fairly solid pebble. From now on, it was a matter of increasing the size of that pebble. I looked at Danpeng. Feeling a sense of stability that I hadn't felt in a long time, I smiled the most contentedly I had since returning. Peng ah, Abba, you're a little lucky charm. Abba, Abba ba. Danpeng laughed, raising his tiny arms, happy to hear the compliment for the first time. He seemed to be in a pretty good mood. The hatching of the egg was different from simply getting a useful divine beast. Name, Kim Danpeng. Level, 1, Strength, 1, Agility, 1, Health, 1, Senses, 1, Divine Power, 100. Acquired Skills. Predator, Growth Rate, 0%. When the growth rate reaches 100%, it will grow to the next level regardless of level. Special Note 1, recognizes you as its master. Special Note 2, it is still a bit capricious. A divine beast with levels and stats. There was no such thing in this tower. Unless it was made like a chimera, being granted a level meant being chosen by the system. Also, it meant that Danpeng was not like a divine beast, but like a player. The basic stats are terrible. The only stat that is leaps and bounds higher is the divine power stat. Perhaps this stat plays the same role as the mana of ordinary players. I can't think of a way to involve him in combat right now. The stats were terrible, and no skills other than Predator had been revealed. Perhaps I would have to figure out the skills one by one in the future. More than anything, I wondered how I could make this tiny guy fight. This is enough for now. The egg hatched and Danpeng appeared, and through the contract with him, I gained an ability more valuable than any skill I had ever wanted. I don't know how great Danpeng is, but I had already received more than I had expected, so this was enough for now. Right now, I just felt that Danpeng in front of me was very cute and pretty. I had even given him a name, Kim Danpeng, so I felt like I had a child. Peng ah, Abba, the guy who had gotten off my shoulder and was crawling around the barracks turned his head. Round eyes. I smiled as I met his eyes. Let's do well together in the future. Chapter 175. So, you're saying this guy came out of there? Thud. As Hargan peeked his head in and stared intently, Danpeng blinked his big eyes a few times. It was a look that seemed to ask what he was doing. Yeah, wow, he's so cute. Looking at Danpeng, Hargan had the reaction of someone who didn't know what to do when they saw a small and cute pet. It was definitely cute. Its head and torso were almost half and half, and it really looked like a character from some game Danpeng story, just like its name. In this tower where all sorts of bizarre monsters roamed, Danpeng had the looks to monopolize someone's cuteness. Don't get too close. Of course, you'll get eaten. Yuan's eyes didn't see it as simply cute. You don't know the main body, so you're like that. As Danpeng hatched, Yuan saw the monster that had been dormant inside it. Moreover, that monster was now nestled inside Yuan as well. Hargan, who didn't know that fact, just tilted his head, wondering what he was talking about. Anyway, you're saying you dropped it? Yeah, you're so protective of your child. That's what parents do. Yuan, who had gently flicked Hargan's face with his palm, immediately brought up the reason he had called him. By the way, tell me about your mother. Why are you suddenly asking about my mom? I've taken a hit, so it's my turn to attack. He couldn't just keep defending. Right now, Heracles was moving around busily by himself, but it was unknown how long that would last. Fortunately, he had a rough idea of Heracles' movements. Every time he raided a temple, Heracles would announce his next destination through the player kit. I can't keep letting Heracles rampage. If this keeps up, the tower we've worked so hard on could collapse. Even Pandora, the card he had been saving, and Athena had been captured. Zeus had only one choice left. Zeus, it's time for you to move directly. He had succeeded in drawing out the giant that had been crouching. So you need to know about the hidden card in this fight. Hidden card? What is that? Yuan and Danpeng blinked their eyes. After a moment of silence, Hargan asked in a flustered voice. Don't tell me. What did you hear before you came here? No, what the hell do I have? Half of Zeus is in you. Hargan's face was bewildered at Yuan's statement. Half? He had something like that in him. Right now, the vessel is too small, so that power isn't coming out properly. But it's definitely there. What the hell are you talking about? So tell me, what kind of person was your mother? My mother was. Hargan hesitated, slurring his words for a moment. Before telling the story, he took a breath. Immediately. She was very beautiful and pure. Hargan's story of his mother began. And she was a woman who loved only one man her entire life. Clank. Zeus's body was covered in gold armor. It was a strange feeling. Other than white cloth, this was the first time Hezen's Gigantomachi had worn armor this hard. No, even in Gigantomachi, thanks mainly to the efforts of Hercules, there were rare occasions when he had to go out. Phew, having finished his preparations, Zeus looked back at the pond. His face, reflected in the pond, looked rather pitiful. Outwardly, it must still have appeared stoic. This, every time I look at it, it puts me in a foul mood. Click. Splash. He flicked his finger lightly, and with the sound of something falling onto the pond, the calm surface of the water rippled. The face of Zeus, which had been reflected naturally, disappeared. What appeared in it was an expression that Zeus had been hitting. I learned through this. A pond that reflects the truth. Before 8, everyone ice laid bare. The expression that had been hidden away deep inside Icehound, and through that, the truth revealed. That a show I learned. That all of humanity is mediocre. Cannot brought countless people here. At first, itwasout of curiosity. Just what did his women think of him? Strangle now, they all made the same expression before him, and he had concealed another identity expression. Of course, they'd be mediocre. Zhu himself knew what kind of person he was. A person with 100 women and hundreds of children, and so, he had come to not love any woman or any child. One that topic, to desire love from someone was greedy. They all made a contemptuous expression towards Zeus, and because he was a king of Olympus, smiled before him. The surface of the pond, which had been broken, soon became calm. On top of the calm surface, the face of another person appeared. I was crazy, the only person who had laughed within this. Totri love again. Shesha had loved him first. Onda Dane grasped his reject hand again. When he had finally brought there to the pond, Zeus had been shocked. It was Thescon time. A person whose face outside the pond was different from the face within. If the difference was anything, it was that the other person, Hera, was the only person who contemptuously, both outside and within, despised Zeus. Yes, crazy. On top of the pond, his own image again appeared. Like that, Zeus, turning his body, gripped lightning in his hand, and for the first time in 1,000 years, stepped outside the temple. Told that guy, I gave half of May. To summarize, roughly speaking, she was the only woman who loved Zeus. Could it be summarized that simply? Hargan, who had spun a long story, nodded his head, awkwardly smiling. What about Olympus? Well, that's not necessarily wrong. It's a fact that my mother loved Zeus. But I don't know if she was the only one. There's Nemesis, and Themis. Yuan chuckled inwardly at the names mentioned. The names of those who took the lead in overthrowing Zeus in the future. They were the ones who desired Zeus's downfall more than anyone else in Olympus. All of them sided with Hades. Didn't you hear? Really? What do you think your mother would have done? Harkin hesitated for a moment at the question, then sighed. There was no need to ponder. Even if the sky were to break in half, she would have probably sided with my father. You're different from her, because love is greater than anything. My mother was a foolish woman who turned a blind eye to what was right for love. Is it okay for you to say that? It doesn't matter. She knew it herself. Harkin shrugged and said with a faint smile. That's why she desperately hoped that I wouldn't live like her. So that's why you're on this side. Yeah, because this is right. Because this is Olympus. The belief that Olympus was a righteous group. The first Olympus was known to have been created to change the chaos of the tower into order. Perhaps Harkin wanted to succeed that legacy. Wang. The player kid in Yuan's arms rang. And at the same time, a familiar cry was heard from above Harkin's head. Abath, Ba, Dan-ah, who had climbed onto Harkin's head, was patting his head. Yuan put Dan-ah back on his shoulder and said, let's get going, we can talk about the rest on the way. The rest? Is there more to talk about? Something I wanted to talk about before coming here. Ah, that, but where are we going? Your great-uncle just started moving. The vibration that rang just now. That vibration was a message that had reached Hades. It's time for us to move as well. Zeus will too. My father. Zeus had hardly done any external activities since the Gigantomachy. However, even Zeus couldn't stay locked up in his temple in a situation where Olympus was cornered like now. No, it's not just that he was secluded. Zeus sits in his temple and watches the world through the pond. And not too long ago, he had struck the city of Camelot, ruled by the Round Table, with lightning. He had stopped all his activities and was planning only one thing. The second Gigantomachy, the great war that would finally lead the giants to their demise. Harkin asked with a slightly tired face. Will this be the last fight? Probably. Yuan nodded. The fight with Olympus will be the last. With Olympus? Yeah, I can tell there's more after that. Yuan nodded again this time. Olympus was a mountain that had to be overcome. But that didn't mean that the other side of the mountain was a flat plain. The mountain that had to be overcome in the end was much higher than this, and Olympus was just the first of many mountains. You said you'd break the ceiling. I will destroy the ceiling of this tower. It was something Yuan said in the tutorial. When he heard it back then, he just thought he was an ambitious guy. He thought that someone like him could stand by his side and eventually match him, the future king of Olympus. But that wasn't it. The tower he had experienced after becoming a player was too wide to look up at the ceiling, and the ceiling he had barely looked up at didn't seem too high. But it wasn't the same for Yuan. He was looking even higher at this very moment. Tell me, what's up there? It was a question that could never be answered, but Halgan was curious. What on earth was up there that both Yuan and Zeus wished to reach? And for some reason, he had a feeling that Yuan might know what was up there. And as expected, his thought was, you don't need to know yet. Yuan didn't say he didn't know. Not yet. Quang, creak, jijijiji, the ground collapsed, and the temple crumbled. It only took a minute or so for the temple, as large as a castle, to collapse. Hercules put the short, 1-meter-long club back on his back and mumbled. That makes 5. 5, that was the number of Olympus temples Hercules had destroyed. After Hera, it was Poseidon, Dionysus, Hestia. And now, even Demeter's temple. Up until the second temple of Athena, the rankers who had been blocking him suddenly disappeared from the third temple onwards. And it was the same up until the fifth temple just now. He was right. After you destroy the second temple, they probably won't bother blocking you from the third one. They must know that it's a waste of time. At first, he thought it was absurd. Even though it was something that could have been predicted, he didn't think they would move exactly as Yuan had predicted, especially from the second temple onwards. He's a strange one. Kururung, above the collapsed temple. Dark smoke billowed in, and the air gradually grew colder. This sign began when Hercules first set foot on the 32nd floor. Strangely enough, it's happening exactly as he said. Dark smoke filled the sky. And from the fifth temple onwards. Quang, a thunderclap as if it was furious. The moment he saw it, Hercules was certain. You'll be able to meet Zeus, the one you wanted to meet. That his words were true. Chapter 176. All he wanted to do was run to Zeus, who was up in the sky. The 32nd floor was a world of abundance. The land was fertile, and the constant rain nourished an abundance of grains and fruits. They fed this to their livestock, providing them with enough meat to banish all worries about food from the 32nd floor. It was no wonder that they even exported to other worlds. As such, the word that symbolized the world of the 32nd floor was peace. However, boom, this world had now become the stage for a great war. Thud, Rancor, who had collapsed in front of Heracles with his back bent in half, was on his knees. He was a famous Rancor named Orion, standing at an impressive height of 4 meters and possessing an overwhelming physique. Are you going to use this guy as a pawn too? Heracles raised his head, covered in sweat. The sky was still covered in thick, dark clouds. Just how many people had he killed by now? He began to feel nauseous. Moreover, his real opponent was somewhere else. Are you going to come out yourself? A growling voice. Boom, swoosh. He swung his club in the air, and part of the clouds split. Don't bother sending out your lackeys. Kihihihing. A group of sun chariots descended from the parted clouds. Carriages drawn by white horses. Players and rankers rode inside. Tisk. Heracles raised his fist. Boom. His fist struck the air. Crack. Zzzzzzzt. Crash. Quadddd. The shockwave from his fist shattered dozens of sun chariots. A penalty flowed into Heracles' body. He had attacked players who were not rankers riding in the sun chariots. As expected, he's trying to drain my blood. Zeus was a cautious character. He never moved directly like this, and instead controlled the many rankers in Olympus like his own limbs from behind the scenes. He was doing the same thing now. Zeus probably won't face you directly. How do you know that? Because that's the kind of guy your father is. Do you know my father that well? And even if you do, aren't you being a bit presumptuous? You'll see when the time comes. It was incredible. How did everything fit together so perfectly? Zeus was the best when it came to seeing the big picture, but this made it feel like Wu Yun was standing on top of Zeus's head. Furthermore, just buy me some time. It doesn't have to be much. He had anticipated all of this and even told him how to deal with it. What is he thinking? He couldn't understand his intentions. In fact, he had been skeptical when he first heard it. But now, he had no choice but to believe. All right. Splurt. Buzz. Thud. A grand tournament with a red carpet where numerous rankers gathered. I guess Olympus has gone downhill. It's a civil war between Hercules and Zeus. It should be interesting to watch. The stadium was bustling. The topic was the recent events in Olympus. There was news that Olympus, which had been a hot topic lately, had finally started a civil war. However, the commotion didn't last long. Thump, thump, thump. Right next to the throne, a man was banging his hammer. The stadium became quiet in an instant. Countless rankers shut their mouths, and the one-eyed man sitting on the throne opened his eyes again. Olympus is Olympus, and we just need to do our job. It's not good to be too interested in what's happening next door. After Hades' visit, Asgard's biggest concern became the civil war in Olympus. Olympus was one of the few guilds comparable to Asgard. Naturally, there were many in Asgard who wished for the downfall of Olympus, so it was only natural that they would talk about it. Moreover, it was even more so now that the war was becoming a reality. We will keep that in mind. Hundreds of people gathered in the stadium bowed their heads and replied. And in response to their reaction, Odin, the king of Asgard sitting on the throne, nodded his head. Well, let's tell them to take care of their own business. Since Hades had left, Olympus and Asgard were no longer connected. There was a more important issue at hand. Surtur, you guys take care of it. If you find anyone poking around for fun, know that you will be kicked out of this castle. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. A thunderous response. Only then did Odin nod his head in satisfaction. With this, the direction of the conversation changed. Soon, one by one, they began to talk about the giants, including Surtur. Even though he had to focus on the meeting, Odin had something strange on his mind. Kim Yu-won, the player who had brought Olympus to this state, who wasn't even a ranker yet. It was strange no matter how he thought about it. No matter how talented he was, there were things that were impossible. He was intrigued. It had been a long time since he had lost interest in outside affairs due to his long battle with the giants. It was the same in the past, at the round table. But I'd like to see him once. For some reason, he became interested in him. He thought he had become indifferent to everything in the world for a long time. I should meet him once if he comes up. Of course. Zeus, if that bastard can survive. Quote. The conference hall fell silent for a moment at Odin's mutter. It seemed that his last voice was loud. Looks like the last voice was loud. Even in that miserable situation, what was reflected in Zeus's eyes was not sorrow or sadness, but regret. A light flashed in the sky. Quirang! A line of lightning bolts fell down. Pajijik, Pajik, a deep hole was created in the ground, and intense sparks flew around it. Hercules raised both arms to protect his head. The lightning bolt that hit him head-on made every corner of his body tingle. Are you coming out now? As he raised his head and looked up at the sky, he could feel Zeus's gaze. Enough sacrifices have already been made. Nearly 100 rankers have already been sacrificed, and even more players have died. Hercules's body was also covered in minor wounds. For Olympus, after the lightning had struck once. Another group of troops approached. Those fanatics. The fact that they were sending in rankers other than Zeus meant only one thing. It meant that he wouldn't be coming out in full force yet. Is he going to provide support from a distance? The range of attacks that Zeus could launch was almost anywhere under this sky. It wouldn't be difficult to find his location as long as he was raining down lightning bolts, but if he held out by sending in other rankers like that, even that wouldn't be easy. Furthermore, long time no see, Hercules. Familiar faces mixed in among them. Dionysus. High rankers from Olympus, such as Dionysus and Demeter. It seemed that they were past the stage of buying time and draining his stamina. They were probably going to spread out the proper rankers and try to capture Hercules. I don't care how many of those guys there are. The problem was not them, but Zeus's contained behind them. He had just been hit by the power of lightning, so he was well aware of its power. No, perhaps even that was because he had considered the influence of the friendly forces that would spread around him and adjusted his strength to some extent. But at this point, gulp, Hercules put strength into the club in his hand. Then, ignoring Dionysus's greeting, he raised his head and looked at the clouds. The corners of Hercules's mouth turned up. Finally. Is it starting now? The prelude to the great battle for the existence of Olympus was about to begin. Pajijik. Lightning bolts filled the pitch-black clouds. Zeus stood in the sky and looked down. Everything on the ground was reflected in his golden eyes, and those eyes had been watching Hercules for quite some time. His son was rampaging on the battlefield. And to kill him. Even in that miserable situation, what was reflected in Zeus's eyes was not sorrow or sadness, but regret. He is quite the dedicated fellow. Crackle. Another bolt of lightning was held in Zeus's hand. I wonder if I can make it again. His gesture was light. Zeus immediately followed Heracles' movements with his golden eyes. For a moment, the friendly forces retreated as if they had made a promise. That was the moment. Zeus's lightning bolts fell down. Quirang. A deafening roar and dazzling light flaunted their influence up to the sky. Heracles once again raised both arms and blocked the lightning with his whole body. Without any special skills or mobility, he had no way to avoid Zeus's lightning. How many more shots will it take to stop him? Crackle. Zeus created another lightning bolt in his hand. I wonder. His best masterpiece. I couldn't make it twice after making it once. That's why I wanted to check it out, even for the next time. Giant Slayer Heracles. How much has he grown to reach himself? That's when Zeus was about to throw the next lightning bolt. Your face is still expensive. Swaa. Suddenly, a pitch-black darkness spread around Zeus. Zeus looked up and looked in the direction the voice came from. Isn't that the same for you? Absolute stealth that blends with the darkness. A high ranker who was considered the best assassin in this tower despite his incompatible appearance. Brother, Hades emerged from the darkness. You started a war. Is this a war so grand? Let's just call it a family fight. Of course, because your family is so big. It was a meaningful word. Zeus changed the direction of the lightning he was holding. And from now on, it seems that it will become a war between brothers. A war between brothers good. It was what he wanted. The reason Hades took such an expensive step here was because he intended to fight. Don't you know, however, brother, you've never beaten me before. That fight had already ended a long time ago. Although they are bound under the name of the Trinity, Zeus's sitting on the throne of Olympus was not a lottery. Yeah, I know, and Hades couldn't have known that fact. But you know, that's why he brought another piece he had been saving. Isn't there one person missing from the war between brothers? Zeus's eyes narrowed. It was a rare nervous look. Srrrung, in the thick darkness created by Hades. A man with beautiful blue hair, contrasting with Hades' jet black hair, appeared from within. I've been waiting for you today, Zeus. One of the Trinity of Olympus. The Lord of the Sea, with the name Poseidon. You dare put me in jail? Poseidon growled at Zeus. Chapter 177. Translated text. Take Poseidon with you. The day Hades first met U1. After saying that he could recruit Hercules, U1 began to draw the big picture of this fight. That guy is in Asgard's prison right now. I know. And you're still saying that? Try to make a deal. Say you need him to fight Zeus. Zeus must be a pain in the ass to you guys too. It wasn't wrong. Considering what Olympus did to create discord between Asgard and the giants, it was only natural for Asgard to be keeping an eye on Olympus. However, they were just waiting for them to divide internally rather than going into an all-out war. If you release Poseidon, it will deepen the conflict between the three gods, and the conflict between Poseidon and Zeus will continue. Asgard has no reason not to comply. What if they think we're trying to gather our strength again to fight them? Once it's confirmed that Hercules has turned around, they'll never think that. Hades had no choice but to nod. If the civil war in Olympus really got serious, if there really came a time when they needed Poseidon, there was a chance that Asgard would release Poseidon. To do that, we first need to recruit Hercules. I know. Are you confident? Yes. It was such a firm answer that it was hard to doubt him. After talking with Yuan, Hades eventually erased the picture he had been drawing and began to draw a new one. No matter what kind of picture he drew, there would be no prettier picture than the one with Hercules and Poseidon joining. It was a gamble, but in the end, Hades couldn't believe this situation. It really happened like this. Below, Hercules was facing Zeus's army. And above, two of the three gods were holding Zeus back. All this, yes, everything, was it all his plan? What the hell was this? He was getting goosebumps. Hercules, himself, Poseidon, and even Zeus right before his eyes. They all moved like pieces on a chessboard, filling in the empty spaces. I'm done doubting him. From the moment U1 recruited Hercules, he had decided to trust him. He had come this far. This fight was now in his hands. What is the ending of this picture? Clang, bang. Lightning exploding before his eyes and waves flowing in the sky. What are you doing? Aren't you going to help? Hades, who had stopped for a moment at Poseidon's cry, began to move again. Hades, one of the three gods of Olympus and a high ranker ranked 61st. Poseidon, a high ranker ranked 72nd with the title of sea god. Both of them were top high rankers within the top 100. They were beings who could face an entire guild with their own power and could fight against over 100 rankers. However, their opponent was someone with a much higher ranking than them. Clang, cuck, bang, Poseidon's body was slammed into the ground. His body was covered with burns from lightning, and blood was flowing from places where it had burst. Poseidon quickly corrected his posture and moved his trident. Giant waves that had been flowing in the air moved along the tip of the spear. In a world full of moisture, Poseidon condensed it into one form. Hundreds of spears of water. It was shot towards Zeus along the tip of the spear. Boom, bam, bam, bam. The lightning barrier that rose in front of Zeus blocked it. Poseidon, seeing this, wiped the blood flowing from his mouth and muttered in annoyance. Unlucky bastard, my brothers and I are fundamentally different. Don't you know that? Not long ago, Poseidon had lost the fight against Zeus and had been imprisoned in Asgard's prison. In that fight, Poseidon had confirmed the overwhelming difference in their abilities. A sky that he could not reach. In the first place, Poseidon, who controlled the mana of water, and Zeus, who controlled the property of electricity, were not very compatible. Then, swish, a palm stretched out right before Zeus's nose. What about me? Thud, a god of the three with a higher rank than Poseidon. Hades, hand grabbed Zeus's neck. The corners of Poseidon's mouth went up. The attack just now had been a stalling tactic to create the current situation. Swish, the power of darkness covered Zeus's head. It was the power of aging that melted skin and corroded bones. The match was over. The same thought flashed through both of their minds. However, it was a good try, but, thud, Zeus grabbed Hades' wrist, which was holding his neck. Also, you can't reach me. Quote exclamation mark quote, crash, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky. Hades dodged it and hid in the darkness again, but it was too late. Hades fell to the ground, just like Poseidon. Hades, who was kneeling on the ground in shock, had a shocked expression on his face. I didn't get him. The wound on Zeus's head was just a scratch. That was the result of his collaboration with Poseidon just now. On the other hand, the two of them had been hit by lightning and had fallen from the sky to the ground. I guess you've been slacking off on your training. Zeus's body floated down. There was a saying in Olympus. Even if everyone in Olympus turned their backs on him, they wouldn't be able to handle Zeus alone. No, that was not only the opinion of Olympus, but also of other large guilds. The power of a single-digit high ranker was on a completely different level. Of course, Poseidon and Hades, who were also part of the three gods, did not agree with that statement. There's that much of a difference. He didn't think he needed another picture. He thought that maybe he could finish this fight before Kim Yu-won even arrived. No, he had to. It was a matter of pride as one of the three gods. You've been cooped up in the temple doing nothing, what do you know about training? Poseidon said in an angry voice, the veins on his forehead bulging. In fact, Zeus had stopped all external activities for 1,000 years since the Gigantomachy. It was absurd for him to talk about training. Nothing at all. However, I guess that's how it looked. Zeus laughed when he heard that. The ones who have been content with reality and haven't done anything are you guys. What, have you ever thought about going higher? Higher. Zeus was still talking about a place higher than the top of the tower. It was the same when Zeus first became a ranker with his brothers. I'm going to climb to the top. If I do, I'll be the real king of this tower. It was a great ambition. It was something that no one in this vast tower had ever done. Zeus was simply not satisfied with Olympus alone. You're already the king of Olympus. Aren't you satisfied with being in that position? A life without looking up is no different from being dead. Even more so in this tower. Hades recalled, this wasn't the first time they had had a conversation like this. Someone wanted to go up, and someone wanted to stay put. And that's when it started. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. The relationship between the three began to break down. That's why I despise you. Zeus no longer called the two of them brothers. His gaze toward them was still unmoving. It was a thought that had already taken root too firmly to reveal emotions like contempt or anger. There was no need to get angry or to pursue the matter. They had already started to go their separate ways a long time ago. As the second period of Gigantomachy the foundation for that, Poseidon, who had planned Gigantomachy and Ragnarok with Zeus, understood Zeus's intentions at a glance. He was the middle ground between Zeus and Hades. The goal was to expand Olympus through war, but he wondered if perhaps that was related to what Zeus called the above. Even if I tell you, you won't believe me, will you? Zeus no longer had any expectations for the two of them. Beings who had become rankers after receiving the system's blessing and had lived lives close to eternity. It was impossible to persuade them. There's no such thing as a next floor. That's just nonsense. There is no longer anything above the tower. That was the common thought of countless rankers who had seen the top of this tower, and Hades was no different. However, no, there is. That response came from a completely different direction, not from Zeus. There's definitely something above. Hades' head turned. Zeus had already noticed it and was looking that way. A familiar face. Yu-won stroked Dan Ah's head and said. You did well. A bath, bah. The guy raised his arm to respond. Judging by his reaction, he seemed to be saying, what's with this? Poseidon made a complex expression when he spotted Yu-won. That guy, Kim Yu-won, he wasn't much of a reliable ally, but it was clear that he was an extraordinary guy if you listened to his story. However, Yu-won had also played a part in why Poseidon was in this state in the first place. Yu-won was the one who had exposed the Knights of the Round Table's corruption and blocked Zeus's lightning. Furthermore, he was the one who had taken away the Stone of the Sea, which Poseidon had wanted. Thud, but for now, he was an ally. Zeus in front of him was difficult enough to handle as it was. It wouldn't be good for another division to arise from their side. Zeus is the priority for now. Poseidon swallowed his anger as he made that decision. On the other hand, Zeus's eyes were shaking for the first time since this fight had started. There's something above. Zeus's voice trembled slightly. To his ears, Yu-won's words just now didn't sound like a mere bluff. Do you know something? Probably more than you do. It wasn't a very sincere answer. Yu-won hadn't even been looking at Zeus when he answered. Fortunately, it's not too late. The fifth temple. It was the same number as when Heracles had started to cause trouble before the regression. And it was also when Zeus, who couldn't bear to see Olympus crumbling, had moved directly. History doesn't repeat unless people change. Yu-won had been waiting for this moment. Crackle, crackle, a fierce current flowed through Zeus's body. Just getting close to him made it feel like his body would burn to a crisp. He was a high ranker within the top 10, who could be called the strongest in this tower. I've finally met a monster. An opponent he had to be nervous about for the first time. Fortunately, Hades and Poseidon had arrived. This is our first fight together. Yu-won spoke to Dan-ah, who was on his shoulder. Be careful not to get an upset stomach. Creak. Inside Yu-won, who was looking at Zeus, the predator opened its mouth. Chapter 178. One day, Zeus called Pandora. This is your gift. It was a box. The three gods of Olympus gave gifts to Pandora, who had become a ranker. Pandora gladly accepted the gift. However, Zeus' gift was a little unusual. You must never open this box. Never. He told her not to open it after giving her the gift. Pandora found it strange. However, she could not disobey the orders of Zeus, the king of Olympus. So, for over hundreds of years, she did not open the box as Zeus had said. She opened it in a very urgent situation. To survive. She ended up opening the box that she had kept in her inventory for a long time. And right after that, she had to embrace all the misfortunes of the world. The situation on the battlefield was not so positive that it could change with the addition of one person. Hades and Poseidon, who had already shed a lot of blood. Even if two of the three gods joined hands, Zeus was not an easy opponent. Furthermore, Yu-won knew that his skills were still far behind the three of them. My job is not a head-on fight. It didn't suit Yu-won's fighting style. However, he needed to know it clearly. The clothes he was going to wear from now on were completely different from the clothes he had been wearing until now. Tell me, Zeus' gaze was fixed on Yu-won. What do you know about this? At that moment, swish, Yu-won's gaze swept over Hades and Poseidon. A brief glance, and they weren't so dull as not to notice the glance. Crash, boom, a huge tidal wave in darkness enveloped Zeus. Zeus, who had been standing still and glaring at Yu-won, immediately raised his arms and aimed at the clouds in the sky. Fall, flash, rumble, dozens of lightning bolts fell under the clouds. The power of each of them might be weak, but the number was enough to neutralize the powers of Hades and Poseidon. Zeus separated the two. Now, the stage was temporarily for Yu-won and Zeus, just the two of them. Tell me. It was a low and heavy voice. The subtle pressure contained within it was enough to call him the head of a guild and a king. Yu-won faced Zeus. As he spoke, the mana of this world moved. It's no different from what you know. Yu-won began his story. It's just that you learned about them through them. Crackle, Hades, darkness devoured the lightning bolts that Zeus had poured out. The time for just the two of them was running out. I just found out for myself. Did you reach it? Yes. It was absurd. Yu-won was not even a ranker yet. Of course, he still lacked the time and skills to reach the place Zeus desired, which was above the highest floor that the rankers had reached. However, Zeus, looking at Yu-won, realized that those words were not a bluff or a lie. I see. Zeus' mind turned quickly. He finally understood. Where did it start to go wrong? Why did everything go wrong because of that one little player? Yu-won was not just a player with great talent. He was already an existence that had climbed higher than himself. I apologize for ignoring you until now. Crackle. An electric armor was worn over the golden armor wrapped around Zeus' body. Now I will face you as my enemy. Flash. A bolt of lightning from Zeus' hand flew towards Yu-won. A bolt of lightning that flew as fast as light. It was not comparable to the one that had fallen on Camelot, but it was a force powerful enough to turn even a high ranker into a pile of ash. And at that moment, rumble, a person stepped between Yu-won and Zeus. Tut, tut, tut. Her hands blocked the thunderbolt and her empty eyes looked up. Zeus. Unlike her eyes, her voice was cold like November. Pandora stared at Zeus and licked her lips. What did you do to me? She remembered clearly, his figure handing her a box. He told her not to open it with eyes and a voice that said, open it. Pandora knew. She had no choice but to open the box. What did you do? She glared at Zeus as if chewing on each word. But unfortunately, Zeus was not looking at her. Is she also a pawn you prepared? Unfortunately, no. Pandora was definitely a ranker higher than Athena. Although she had not been active for a long time, her ranking was not properly ranked, but if she looked at the ranking alone, she would definitely be just below the three gods. She might not be able to beat Zeus, but she could withstand the thunderbolt. However, she was not part of Wu-won's plan in the first place. She is a karma you created. I see. As he said just now, Zeus was now wary of Wu Won at this moment. Of course, what he was wary of was not his ability. It was the picture he had drawn for this moment. If it wasn't in the plan, there's no need to be afraid. And if it was outside the picture, it didn't matter. Pandora or not, Zeus was confident that he could handle it. And that in itself was not arrogance, but a clear fact. As Zeus prepared his next thunderbolt, swoosh, Hades and Poseidon broke through the boundary he had created and entered. You're here at last. Zeus looked back at the two. The pawns you prepared, now in Zeus' eyes, they no longer looked like brothers. It had been that way for a long time, so I just saw it as one or two passers-by. However, at this moment, Zeus saw the two of them differently. A pawn prepared by Kim Woo-won. If he, who had risen higher than him, fell down and prepared a pawn, the story would be different. Pandora, Hades, who broke through the thunderbolt, looked at Woo-won and Zeus alternately. It wasn't that long, but I thought Woo-won wouldn't be able to hold out, but Pandora was there in the meantime. Pandora was one of the few beings in Olympus who could withstand Zeus' thunderbolt. It was not an incomprehensible situation if she was helping Woo-won. But how is Pandora here? Why is she helping that guy? It was a completely unknown situation. I recognized Pandora's skills, but it was hard to understand that she had broken through the barrier that even they could not easily penetrate. And the same goes for Zeus. Then I'll be going now. Paget, Zeus's body disappeared from its place. Pandora's eyes turned. The next moment, Zeus's fist stretched out towards Woo-won's head with an electric shock. Kwang, Pandora's body bounced away. She was instinctively protecting Woo-won. Let's fight a little more aggressively. They were aiming for Woo-won, not themselves. Hades realized the rule of this fight when he realized that fact. Poseidon, I know. The person Zeus was after. That person was the king of this battlefield. And now, Woo-won had become the king of this battlefield. I don't know exactly what's going on. Hades hides his body in the darkness. But anyway, I can't just leave it to that guy. Poseidon drew another wave by drawing all the moisture around him. Pandora, who had been thrown away, was blocking Zeus's next move, and one of her arms was drooping as if her shoulder was broken. And that moment, hell is summoned. Pasususu. Through Woo-won's quinine, the color of the surroundings began to change. All four sides turned black. At the same time, Hades' mana mutated. That wasn't the end. Splash. A massive amount of water poured out from within it. The familiar magical power that wrapped around Poseidon's body along with the fragrant salty smell. Sea is being summoned. At that moment, Poseidon's eyes opened wide. Sea's stone, Black God's stone and Sea God's stone. The two different types of power that the two items possessed manifested in this place. It changed the environment so that the two people could fight with their maximum ability. That was the first measure Woo-won had prepared in this fight. A shark can only exert its power in the water. Splash. A tremendous amount of magical power was consumed through Quine and Triangle. It was originally an environment that should have become Woo-won's power, but this time it was different. These two powers originally belonged to Poseidon and Hades, who were the three gods. The rankings of the two people had jumped higher than the starting point where they acquired the Black God's stone and Sea God's stone. Was that the proof? The eyes of Poseidon looking at Woo-won flickered with greed, and Hades, who didn't know about the existence of the Black God's stone, had a face of doubt. Fortunately, however, the two people, who were high rankers at the level of the three gods, didn't waste time in this situation. Swish. The darkness of Hades, who borrowed the power of hell, devoured Zeus's light. The power that couldn't even be compared to a moment ago was now becoming a power struggle to some extent. Zeus's eyebrows twitched. The same went for Poseidon. Splash. A huge tsunami that had never been seen before. The tsunami of Poseidon, who controlled it with the tip of his trident, devoured Zeus's body. Roar. The pouring seawater. Crackle. Zeus's hand, which held the thunderbolt, split it in half like the Red Sea. But the tsunami wasn't one. Bang. In an instant, an even larger tsunami than before swept over it. As Poseidon's waves devoured Zeus, Hades approached Woo-won. What did you do? I changed the environment a bit. What did you do? If I tell you, will you take it away? At Woo-won's words, Hades noticed Poseidon's gaze looking at Woo-won from afar. Even in this situation, he didn't give up his obsession with the Sea's stone. Even if he got it at the place that had already become a sinner of Asgard, nothing would change. I don't want to be like that guy. If asked if he wasn't greedy, he would have to answer no. However, Hades knew why Poseidon had become like that, and he accepted the fact that he could end up in the same situation depending on his answer. The player in front of him was already such an existence. You're wise. So what happens now? Hades had come to recognize Yuan as the one leading this game. At least it was clear that Yuan was the one who created this fight and was leading it. With this, the odds of winning will go up from 0 to 1. 10%. Yes. That's too low. It was still a slim possibility. Hades doubted the words, but at least Yuan was sure. What you see isn't everything. It wasn't for nothing that people said that if all the single-digit rankers gathered, they could destroy this tower. That much meant that Zeus's power should be considered absolute. In addition, Zeus would probably have 1 or 2 more hidden cards. I considered the invisible parts and said 1, but there was no need to say it. Besides, the invisible part is my job. Yuan was waiting. Heavenly god Zeus. The sky of Olympus. The moment he was cornered and revealed everything he had been hiding. So take it out quickly, Zeus. Bang. The rising sea. A huge golden lightning pillar piercing through the sky. Thud. Zeus slowly walked out of Poseidon's sea. Now was the real fight of the 3 gods. Chapter 179. Bzzzt. Crackle. Electricity mixed with seawater covered the ground. Various types of magic intertwined and screamed. The mana spread in the atmosphere was extinguished, and the land changed color in a complex way. On the sun chariot, Hargan watched the scene. Heaven beyond heaven, heaven outside the sky. Growing up in Olympus, Hargan had seen many rankers. Among them, there were many who were close to being high rankers. Even his own mother was a ranker who had reached the top of the tower. However, the fight happening before his eyes now was a fight of a different dimension than that. The rankers of rankers. It was a fight between those who reached the top of the high rankers, the beings called the highest rankers. There was no place for him to intervene in such a fight. However, you have one thing to do. The piece of Zeus's thunderbolt. Hold on to it. A piece of the thunderbolt. A power with the power of electricity, the power that was the foundation of Zeus. Yuan only had a very small piece, but Hargan had a fairly large piece. Although he still couldn't properly manifest that power because he wasn't even a ranker yet. If it's the same kind of power, the story changes. Was he really a being who had inherited half of Zeus? Did Zeus really have such affection for him? He was curious. He wanted to check. Gulp. Magic vibrating in the battlefield. Hargan, who reached out towards it, recalled Yuan's words. In the world I lived in, there was something called a lightning rod. Crack. Quote exclamation mark quote. Poseidon's body was blown away like a corpse. On Zeus's body, covered in golden armor, was a mark from Poseidon's trident. However, it ultimately failed to pierce Zeus's armor. Swish. Hades, who went behind Zeus. Magic from hell engulfed Zeus's body. It bound Zeus's body for a very short time and restricted his movements. Immediately after, piece of the thunderbolt, reacts to, Quini. Black lightning poured from the sky. Kwa rung. A downpour of lightning bolts over Zeus's head. In Yuan's fire eyes, which went up and poured it out, Zeus's figure was reflected. It doesn't work, after all. The armor that Poseidon's trident had pierced. He thought he had aimed precisely at the gap, but the armor had already returned to its original state. The lightning armor surrounding Zeus's body. It wasn't a special item, but a kind of skill made from Zeus's magic. The defense was ridiculously high, and just approaching it would cause damage from the electricity. The regeneration speed was also quite fast, so it wasn't easy to pierce through it. The reason Hades' darkness didn't work was also because of that lightning armor. The most fearsome thing about Father was that impenetrable armor. Not the thunderbolt. The thunderbolt isn't a simple weapon. It was a spear, a shield, an armor, and Father's power itself. Thunderbolt. It was known to the world as a lightning spear that pierced through everything, but it was an object that meant Zeus himself. No, even calling it an object in the first place was a euphemism. That's why Heracles always said this when talking about Zeus. As long as you don't pierce through that armor, you'll never reach Father. Absolute defense. Zeus, who had the strongest spear, also unfairly had the strongest armor. Golden Eyes, is looking at you. Eyes met. Zeus, who had discovered Yuan, was blunt. Thud. In an instant, the two people were at the same eye level. A spear was suddenly in Zeus's hand. Flash. Sensory field, is activated. Magic, is released. Sensory field, is enhanced. A spear that grazed Yuan's body. It was a close call. If he hadn't avoided it, Zeus's lightning would have pierced through Yuan's body. I expected it to be somewhat difficult. Zeus approaching quickly. Despite using both sensory territory and harmony, Zeus's movements were so fast that it was difficult to follow them with the naked eye. It's a little later than expected. Thud, Zeus's fist and Pandora's fist collided. Pandora's body staggered. Even though it must have hurt quite a bit, she charged at Zeus again as if she didn't know what pain was. The clash didn't last long. Rip, Zeus approached Yuan without paying any attention to her. It was then, you're too late. Buzz, zap. Another fist appeared, colliding with Zeus's fist and not being pushed back. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The shockwave of mana created by the collision of the two fists pushed Yuan's body away. As expected, it was that guy. The only one in Olympus who can't be pushed back when clashing with Zeus. The strongest card Yuan had prepared for this moment. Don't say anything too soon. I had a hard time on my own. He pushed Zeus's body back with just his bare fists. Even if he was ranked second, he was above Zeus in terms of pure strength when clashing head-on. Soon, his gaze turned to Zeus. We finally meet. A large man with a lion's skin draped over his head and a wooden club in his hand. Father, Heracles spat out the word and glared at Zeus. Zeus's expression turned serious. The guy who was originally planning to hunt by pushing the troops forward and throwing lightning bolts from behind had defeated all the troops and reached this place. It was because of Hades and Poseidon's interference. Two of the three gods, Pandora, and even Heracles. Now, the situation had become truly inconvenient for him. This makes my chances of winning 30%. It was a gamble made to catch a single-digit ranker, and it was still not enough. If it had been Heracles from the time of the second Gigantomachy, that would have been different, but the Heracles at this point in time had not yet reached Zeus. Heracles, he would be truly complete when he got his hands on a proper weapon, not a wooden club like that. Gulp, gulp, Heracles, muscles swelled as the mana contained within them expanded. His entire body's muscles were moving and alive. You have witnessed perfect gigantification. The power of the giant cries out for battle. Your gigantification reacts. As if responding to that power, Yuan's skill stirred within him. Come on, let me fight too. Of course, it was impossible. It's not a fight I should be a part of. Gigantification was definitely a great skill. He had gone from partial gigantification to full-body gigantification, but even so, Yuan's gigantification still had a long way to go. Furthermore, the gap between Heracles and Yuan right now was as vast as the difference between heaven and earth, even in terms of stats alone. No matter how much his mana stat increased, as long as it wasn't backed up by basic physical strength, that realm would remain out of reach. Thud, Heracles, foot slammed into the ground. The ground shook as if an earthquake had occurred. Buzz, Heracles, club flew towards Zeus's head. A blow that could easily crush a mountain. The power of the giant within it was fully unleashed to burst Zeus's head. Zap, lightning bolts erupted from Zeus's hand, pushing Heracles' club away. It was just an ordinary club carved from wood. No matter how much mana was poured into it to strengthen it, it could not withstand Zeus's power. Crack, the club cracked, and Heracles immediately swung his fist. And in that gap, screech, Poseidon's spear and Hades' hand flew towards Zeus's left and right, respectively. Gulp, Yuan, who had been tense, swallowed his saliva for a moment and looked at Zeus. He was holding his ground against the three gods and Heracles. The power of his lightning bolts was still intact, and the three of them were unable to pierce Zeus's armor. A battle to see whether the three of them will collapse from exhaustion first, or whether Zeus's mana will run out. However, the latter possibility was not very high. Even without the thunderbolt, he must be receiving an almost infinite amount of some kind of power. That's why what happens from now on is important. It's time to move. Yuan's gaze shifted to the sky. Hargan, that was the signal. With Heracles' arrival, the preparations were complete. There wasn't much magic power left. Now it was Hargan's turn. Pass it. A small, bright yellow light flickered in the sky. Fragment of lightning, responds to the new fragment. Pajijik, Pajik, the light grew stronger and stronger. Now even Zeus, who had been unaware of it, must have noticed it. He stopped fighting and looked up at the sky where the light was. Hargan, his voice was a little sad. His guess was right. Fragment of lightning, wishes to return to its original form. Fragment of lightning, is selecting its master. The power that had once been one began to merge again. There were three of them now, including Yuan's, but that was only a small part of it. The real half was somewhere else. Hargan, Zeus shouted, glaring at Hargan. The lightning that surrounded his body disappeared. The power that had been enveloping him was stripped bare and headed towards Hargan. This was what happened when all the pieces of power were manifested. Hargan was now challenging the power of Zeus lightning. To determine the real master. If it were the original, I could hold on for a few minutes with a half-piece fragment. Because of this, Hargan would succeed in breaking Olympus in the distant future. Unlike now, when Hargan was a high ranker. I don't have time now. As someone who had just acquired the power of a ranker, he didn't know how long he would be able to hold on to the power, even if he had half of the lightning. At most, a dozen or so seconds. Maybe just a few seconds. The time it would take for the lightning to find its original master wouldn't be long. Hargan was nothing compared to Zeus, after all. But at least for that short amount of time, Zeus would be in a state where he didn't have the power of lightning, literally stripped bare. As expected, Pook, Poseidon's trident pierced Zeus' shoulder. You're nothing without your lightning. Is that how it looks to you? Swat. Zeus grabbed the trident that was embedded in his shoulder. Pook. Boom. Quang. Zeus pulled the trident out of his shoulder and stabbed Poseidon's body into the ground. Poseidon's eyes rolled back in his head at the sudden turn of events, and he was buried deep in the ground. Even without it, I'm stronger than you, brother. A tiger is still a tiger, even if it loses its teeth. Shook. Hades. Darkness enveloped Zeus' body. He was different from Poseidon. Now that Zeus didn't have his lightning, Hades, who used the power of darkness, was an opponent he had to be wary of. But even so, the fact that you've lost your teeth doesn't change. The voice came from the direction. Zeus reached out in the opposite direction. Is that so? Swat. Zeus, hand grabbed Hades, fist. Oodoo-doo-dook. The fist bent in the opposite direction. But even so, I won't lose to a fox. Even if you're a tiger. Hades, whose hand had been broken, emerged from the darkness with a smile on his face. If you're unlucky, you could be bitten to death by a baby mouse. A sense of unease washed over him. Zeus realized that he had missed something. The lightning you had, Hades, voice came from the opposite side, where he had been standing. I'll take it. Yuan's hand reached out from there. Chapter 180, out of the darkness of Hades, an arrow shot past Zeus. A few seconds that felt like an eternity passed, and Zeus lost half of the world. New chapter, leveling with the gods 180. But where the hell is the lightning? Odin, the king of another world who knew Zeus, asked. Unlike Poseidon or Hades, that guy doesn't carry anything on his body. Zeus doesn't come forward unless it's something serious. The last time he used the power of lightning properly was when Olympus was breaking apart. Even Odin couldn't find the location of the lightning against Zeus, who didn't even use his strength. Shouldn't we find the hidden lightning first? Father has never hidden his lightning. Rather, he has always shown it to us. Lightning was the strongest item Zeus had. It was also Olympus itself and was known to have one of the greatest powers in the entire tower. He always carried the strongest item outside. But not many people knew what Zeus's lightning was. To succeed in breaking Olympus, we must take that lightning. It wasn't a choice but a necessity. Without taking away the lightning, it would be impossible to defeat Zeus with only the incomplete Heracles and the other two gods. That's why taking the lightning was the most important role of those who went back to the past. Heracles also knew that fact, and maybe the one who would go back to the past would be himself. Father's lightning, that's why he said it. His father. Where Zeus's lightning was hidden. In an instant, Zeus's eyes looked at Wu Jin. A sense of anxiety he had never felt before. Both of his hands were held by Hades, and the power of lightning was sealed for a moment. In addition, swish, behind him, Heracles' hand grabs his shoulders. He couldn't move. There was no way he could escape Heracles' clutches without lightning. No way. Wu Jin's approaching hand. Zeus tightly shut his eyes to where the hand was headed. No, he tried to close it. At that moment, poof, swoosh, swish, the item that made the current Zeus possible. Hades, who emerged from the darkness, brushed past Zeus. A few seconds that felt like an eternity passed, and Zeus lost half of his world. Crash. Electricity began to emit from Zeus's body. Rumble. Heracles let go of the hand he was holding as a giant pillar of electricity rose up. A tingling current ran through his body. Hades and Poseidon frowned as the thunderbolt that had been sealed for a moment reopened. That was the chance. Poseidon muttered in regret. Hades agreed. For some reason, Zeus couldn't use his thunderbolt, and that short period of time was a very short time when they had the absolute advantage. Was it a problem that I trusted that bastard too much? That short gap. Hades decided to help him, as if he was aiming for something. In the first place, it was Wu One who created the gap and it was Wu One who tried to use that time, so he judged that it was right to help him. However, the result that followed was still regrettable. Just one eye. One eye. In some ways, it was a great achievement. However, he didn't think that Zeus's vision would narrow just because he lost one eye. Just because he made him close one eye, the odds of winning wouldn't change. Just then, with this, clang, Wu Wan, who had taken one of Zeus's eyes, squeezed it hard. 70%, 70%, surely, he would have said that the odds of winning were only about 10% just a moment ago. Hades looked at the golden light emanating from Wu Wan's hand with a sense of wonder. An unusual magic power. Such magic power could not have come from a simple eye. That moment, no way, a hypothesis flashed through Hades' mind. Is that the thunderbolt? What is Zeus's thunderbolt? No one knew. Even Hephaestus, who made the item, said that its shape was not fixed. Moreover, Zeus, the owner of the thunderbolt, always lived with 1,000 layers of cloth on his body, so it was impossible to know what the thunderbolt really was. But what if he had planted the thunderbolt in his eye? Yes. Crackle. Wu Wan answered the great power that was raging in his hand. Godstone. The last and largest of the three pieces. The last and biggest of the three pieces. Didn't I tell you? The lightning bolt. He really stuck it in plain sight. Zeus always hid the lightning bolt in his eye. It became Zeus's eye and at the same time the source of his power. That's why he hid the lightning bolt in a place no one else could find. Right in his right eye. So, the golden eye meant the lightning bolt. Eyes that could see far like the one golden crow and pierce through the truth. It seemed like that was also one of the effects of putting the lightning bolt in his eye. And Wu Wan finally got his hands on it. Then what's that? Crackle, sizzle, Hades asked about the electricity coming out of Zeus's body. It didn't look much different from before. No, it looked even more fierce than before. It's a kind of demonstration. The immortal magic power. I'm still alive and kicking. Even though he lost the lightning bolt, the properties of Zeus's magic power didn't change. The power of electricity blazing around him was the original power of his magic power. However, Zeus's power without the power of an item was bound to drop significantly compared to before. In terms of ranking somewhere in the late 10s. Maybe around 20th. It was amazing how much of a difference one item could make. But that was the extent of Zeus's estimated abilities after losing the lightning bolt. And to that extent, the scales of this fight would definitely tip in their favor. As expected, I don't know why, but, boom, Heracles, who approached Zeus, raised his cracked club high. You look much smaller than before. Clang, 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 clang. Zeus's electricity and Heracles' club clashed. The cracked club didn't break. Also, it didn't bounce off like the first collision. His power was 3 times stronger. In the meantime, Heracles reached out his other hand towards Zeus. Crackle. Zeus's electricity resisted fiercely. It wrapped around Zeus's body again, becoming a solid armor of electricity. But what the heck? Crackle. Unlike before, Heracles' grip tore through the armor with ease. Didn't I tell you? Bam. Heracles' foot strikes Zeus in the chest. You've grown smaller. It was the first time. A small groan escaped Zeus' mouth. Pushed back by the shock to his chest, Zeus looked around for a moment, dizzy. The darkness that now enveloped him and the waves of the sea that rose into the sky. Poseidon's spearhead was aimed at him, and Hades' darkness already enveloped all sides. Heracles relentlessly pursued him. Originally, these were 3 people who could be defeated in one blow, but now the situation was different. Bam! The fist wrapped in lightning and Heracles' fist collided. He loses in strength against strength. He barely manages to keep up by pouring out all his magic power. Heracles did not become the hero of Olympus for nothing. He was the being who had become the strongest in the gigantomachy that he had planned. Swoosh. Groan. The baptism of water pouring down from above crushes Zeus' body. Zeus loses his balance. Barely reaching out his hand and emitting lightning, Zeus imitated the thunderbolts. I didn't know the absence of one item would be this big. Opening his remaining eye, Zeus pushed away the water, sweat dripping from his forehead. If he relaxed even a little, it seemed like his body would be crushed by the strong current. Strong. This was the power of Poseidon, who had half the power of the sea god stone on his back. On the other hand, I didn't know that having my thunderbolt taken away would be this big. Having his thunderbolt taken away was, literally, no different from being stripped naked. Swoosh. Boom. A fist stretched out from between the parted waters. Zeus' body, which had been barely holding on, staggered, and at the same time Poseidon's water swallowed Zeus. Splash. The water pressure of the sea was truly mysterious. It was just water, but once inside, it felt like his whole body was shrinking and being crushed. In this, it felt impossible to move with just brute strength. In it, Zeus discovered Heracles slowly walking towards him. His physique is truly ignorant. To be able to walk in this strong current and water pressure. Although he's not that big, it feels like I'm standing before a gigantes. It became even clearer after losing the thunderbolt. Just how great the Heracles before my eyes is. If such a great spear like the thunderbolt were to be placed in his hand, what kind of being will he become? I've been raising a monster. Perhaps if this place wasn't here, he could have become an existence that could chase me out in the future. Crackle. Boom. Zeus's body emitted electricity once more, creating a large hole above Poseidon's sea. Right after, Hades's darkness covered Zeus. Tch. His skin turned black and rotted as if it was burning. Meaning that Hades's darkness was piercing through Zeus's armor. However, my eye still remains, although the thunderbolt that acted as an eye was taken away. That didn't mean that this darkness couldn't be seen. Roar. Zeus stretched out his hand. Towards Hades's neck, he was certain that there should have been a sense of touch at the tip of his hand. But, swish, all that was caught was empty air. You've gotten much slower. Stab. A slight pain on the nape of his neck. Through the back of his neck that was grabbed by his broken hand, the energy of Hades, who was called the god of death, entered. Cuck. Suddenly, blood spurted out of his mouth. Crackle crackle crackle. He hurriedly turned his body and emitted electricity, but it was a beat too late. Stab. A small wound was made on Hades's cheek. That was all. As if he had already anticipated Zeus's counterattack, Hades disappeared back into the darkness once more. Zeus didn't have enough strength to pierce through this darkness and attack Hades. Zeus spat out saliva. It was only for a short moment, but the sense of powerlessness from losing his strength attacked his entire body. Thunderbolt. If only he had that. Crackle. It was then, a familiar flow of mana was felt from the sky above the sea. At the same time, a single figure was clearly seen through his remaining eye. Rumble. Yuan standing above the clouds. And in his hand, a long spear of electricity that was dozens of meters long. Thunderbolt. The thunderbolt in his hand absorbed the electricity he had emitted and created the strongest spear. Flash. Now the tip of the spear edge was pointed at them.